Hey guys, enjoy these new 20 stories. We hope you enjoy them. Let us know your thoughts. And as always, most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button too. It's free and does so much for us. We're forever grateful. Now to the stories.
I woke up to the worst kind of text notification. Joe had sent me something. My heart rate spiked before I even unlocked my screen. It was 8:17 a.m. on a Saturday, sunlight creeping through the blinds. I was still half in a dream where everything felt soft and safe. Then there was that buzz, like someone shaking a can of soda and handing it to you without warning. I tapped the message and saw a link. A funny meme, not an inside joke. This was different. I had no idea I was about to dive into Joe's big secret. The day before, we'd spent hours binge watching shows and ordering pizza from that greasy hole in the wall down the street. We joked about how perfect our relationship was, like it was this indie movie no one else got. When I scrolled through his phone to show him a hilarious TikTok, I noticed he was logged into two different social apps. One was his everyday account, with pictures of us at concerts and coffee dates. The other had nothing but views and followers, nearly 10,000 by Saturday afternoon. It was hidden behind a fake name, a bland profile pic, and videos that looked like they'd been ripped straight out of someone else's breakup montage. I shrugged it off at first, telling myself Joe was just dabbling in content creation, but something felt off. I saved the screen but said nothing, chalking it up to overthinking. That evening, we met up with friends at the skate park. Everyone was laughing and ollieing over ramps, but I couldn't shake that nagging feeling. I'd noticed Joe slipping his phone into his back pocket, checking notifications like he was hiding something. We left before midnight, walked back through empty streets, and chatted about morning classes and weekend plans. He kissed my forehead and dropped me off at home without a word. My stomach twisted. Why the sudden quiet? Sleep was impossible. Instead of counting sheep, I counted the minutes until I'd see that link. Finally, at 8:17, it arrived. The link opened to a video with a plain black background and white text, our names sitting there like the title of a cheap drama. Then it cut to clips of us arguing, at least moments that were heavily edited to look like fights. Me yelling about his phone addiction, and stomping off in the living room, me crying on my bed. But here's the thing, none of it was real. I remembered each clip, but they'd been spliced together to feel like a real breakup. My blood ran cold as I realized he'd been filming us in secret. For the next hour, I sat cross-legged on my floor, phone in hand, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I watched the entire 10-minute montage. He recorded with his screen turned away, capturing every time I got frustrated. Then he posted those clips for likes, for comments, for strangers to feel bad for me. The comments were brutal, overdramatic, get over it, she needs to chill. At the end of the video, a final card appeared. That was our last fight. See you around. Then the screen faded to black. I jumped when another notification popped up, a follow-up message from Joe himself. Watch this before I tell you, it said. His tone was chillingly casual. I felt like someone had carved a hollow out of my chest. I replayed the stage argument scene 50 times, my mind racing through every memory of us. I remember laughing in bed, arguing over which movie to watch, joking about our future. None of that made it into the compilation. Instead, he'd stitched together moments that made me look unstable, needy, over-emotional. It was like he'd taken a crooked mirror to my face and framed me for the world to judge. After the video, he'd added one more clip. Him scrolling through the comments on his fake account, smirking as he read it out loud. Then he paused the footage on me crying, paused on the exact moment where my mascara was running down my cheeks. It was personal, invasive. I hated that I could remember how heavy my tears felt, the way my shoulders hunched as I tried to pull myself together. More than that, I hated that he thought this was funny, that he turned something vulnerable into a spectacle. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. Look, I'm gonna move on, read his next message. No apology, no hesitation. Just a statement. It felt like the final nail in a coffin he built himself. I studied the words on my screen, each letter mocking me. I had to remind myself to breathe. I spent the rest of the day pacing my room, staring at the empty walls. Every time I thought about calling him, I remembered the video and my voice echoing in his phone, turned into content. I remembered the last clip where he shrugged and said nothing, the silence louder than any breakup speech. I scribbled notes in my journal, trying to map out what had happened. Where did our laughter go? When did he decide that my emotions were plot points? Later, I ventured outside for the first time since dawn. The sunlight felt harsh, like it was spotlighting my pain. I walked to the corner store and bought a cinnamon bun and sat on the curb watching cars go by. The world didn't stop for me. People were living their normal lives, going to work, grabbing coffee, meeting friends, while I was stuck in a loop of betrayal. By evening, my phone was silent. No new messages, no notifications, except the occasional like on some old selfie. Joe had already wiped the slate clean on his main account, but his fake page was still live, drawing in viewers who didn't know me. I thought about reporting it, blocking it, but I was too exhausted to fight. It felt like chasing smoke. That night, I watched my ceiling fan spin in circles, listening to its low hum. It was weirdly comforting, like it was saying everything was going to be okay eventually. I texted a friend who asked how I was doing. I typed out a long message trying to explain without sounding like a broken record. Half of it made sense. Half of it sounded absurd. I'd been manipulated into starring my own breakup show. Sleep finally came at 3 a.m., but it wasn't peaceful. I dreamed about cameras tucked behind furniture, microphones recording every sigh. I woke up in a panic, not sure if the dream was real. Then I remembered it was worse than any nightmare because Joe had already done it. Next morning, I deleted the app. I unfollowed the accounts, blocked the numbers. I cleared my browser history and emptied my trash can. It felt like I was erasing him from my life bit by bit, but every time I thought I'd wiped him out, I heard that click of the play button in my head. So here I am, typing this out like some weird confession, trying to make sense of it all. My trust is fractured, but I'm not broken. I'm learning to separate who I am from his twisted clips. I'm more than a highlight reel of tears and fights. And Joe, he's already moved on to his next stunt. He'll find someone new to feature in his fake dramas. But me, I'm done starring in someone else's show. I smelled garlic bread and warm marinara sauce before I even pushed open the door. The place was our go-to spot. Dominoes with checkered tablecloths and those red plastic baskets that hold way too much bread. The jukebox in the corner played some old rock tune as light from a neon beer sign flickered on the wall. I slid into the booth across from James, sipping my iced tea and wondering why my stomach was twisting into knots. He'd been texting me all week about catching up, and I'd been buzzing with excitement, picturing us laughing over spaghetti like old times. But something in his eyes looked off when he smiled. We started with breadsticks, hot and buttery, and chatted about finals, campus drama, the usual stuff. The server set down steaming plates of fettuccine alfredo and forked a big twist into my mouth, letting the cheesy sauce coat my tongue. I told him about my new internship, all the late nights editing podcasts, and he nodded, but I could tell he was distracted. He kept glancing at his phone, and each time it buzzed, his thumb would flick over the screen like he was reading something that made him frown. Halfway through the meal, James put down his fork and leaned forward. "I want to show you something," he said. His voice sounded calm, like he was about to give me a high five for helping him move a couch. Then he slid his phone across the table without breaking eye contact. He didn't say please, didn't apologize for interrupting our dinner, just placed it there. On the screen was a video thumbnail, a tight close-up of my face, mouth open, tears rolling down my cheeks. My heart lurched. I swallowed a mouthful of pasta, trying not to choke. "What's that?" I asked, voice shaking. He shrugged and tapped play. A low hum of conversation filled the restaurant, forks clinking on plates, but in our booth, it felt like time had slowed to a crawl. The screen lit up with flashing images, moments I thought nobody saw, but they had. Me crying on his shoulder after my grandmother passed away. Me sobbing into my pillow because I'd bombed a midterm. Me tearing up when he forgot our anniversary. Moments private and raw, strung into a compilation that looked like the trailer for a tragedy. I felt my cheeks burn. "James, why?" My voice cracked. He held up a hand and cut me off without words. The video moved on to scenes from our apartment. Me hunched on the couch with wine in one hand, my phone in the other, crying because I thought I was alone. Clips of me crying in the car after a fight with my roommate. Crying when my dog was sick. Crying because I was stressed about money. Then it cut to black. Text appeared. "I've watched all of this to decide if I could keep loving you." Then a shot of him, arms crossed, looking down at the floor. Another title card. I can't. The last frame froze on my tear-streaked face, blinking mid-cry. The restaurant lights felt too bright. I blinked back tears of shock, turned to him, but he looked away. I jammed my phone into my pocket and shoved my plate aside. You made this. I couldn't quite breathe. He met my gaze. I just wanted to be sure, he said flatly. I wanted to see every time you fell apart. I thought if I watched it all, I'd know if we were really working. His words hit me like a slap. You filmed me without telling me. You spliced it together like some thesis. He ran a hand through his hair. You're always crying. It was said like it was fact, not an insult. I couldn't handle it anymore. My chest burned. So you sat on this and watched me hurt. For how long? I stood up, chair scraping. People glanced over. Heat rushed to my ears. You tortured me in private, and now you decided dinner. I looked at the screen, my tears reflecting in his phone's glass. He shrugged, as if shrugging could erase what he'd done. It's done. No apology, no explanation. Just finality. He slid the phone back to me and flicked off the screen. The jelly on my toast was sweet. I tasted panic. Was this for a project? Are you posting it somewhere? My voice shook. He shook his head. Just needed to know. I grabbed my purse, yanked out my wallet, and pushed a 20 across the table. He didn't move. I forced the cash into his hand and marched out, heart hammering so loud I heard it in my ears. Outside the night was cool, the sky dotted with stars. I hugged myself, feeling like I'd been hollowed out. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I walked without direction, chewing on that video. Every frame played in my mind. I remembered how I thought James was my rock, how I trusted him when I was weak. Now I realized I'd been nothing more than research to him. My tears were data points. I ended up at the riverfront, sitting on a bench overlooking the water. Boats bobbed gently. Couples strolled by hand in hand. The moonlight glinted off the waves. I put my face in my hands. It hit me that I was standing where we'd once planned our dream life, talking about moving together, picking out furniture, naming our future kids. All of that felt like a lie now, like the whole relationship had been one-sided, with him as a director and me as the subject. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from my roommate, "You okay?" I typed back a half-hearted yes before deleting it. What could I say? That my boyfriend made a film of my worst moments and showed it to me like a grading rubric. The next morning, my eyes felt puffy. I stared at my reflection. Shadows under my eyes looked like bruises, but I realized I was free of something toxic. I deleted the video, wiped it from my phone, from my mind. I unfollowed him everywhere. I called my best friend, her voice bright and frantic. I cried again, but this time on the phone, telling her every detail. As I spoke, I felt the weight lift a little. Crying wasn't weakness. It was proof I felt deeply that I cared. I filed for a refund from Domino's, claiming the food made me sick. Petty maybe, but I didn't care. I went back there 2 days later with my friend. We drank soda, laughed too loud, talked about reality TV. When the server asked if I wanted to split a dessert, I said yes. I realized that healing didn't happen in a booth alone. It happened with friends who saw you at your worst and still loved you. I thought about James and his video. I imagined him making another one, thinking he could predict my every reaction. But this time, I wouldn't be the subject. I'd be the one telling the story, my own story, on my own terms. I packed my bag, left that bench by the river, and walked back toward town. The night air felt less heavy. My steps grew lighter. I knew there would be nights when I still replayed that video, but I also knew I'd build new memories, ones I chose to share, ones I could control. And maybe that was what mattered most. I threw open my mailbox expecting the usual stack of bills and junk flyers, but instead I found the heaviest envelope I'd ever held. It had my name scrawled across the front in neat handwriting, addressed to me at work. My heart sank like I dropped an anchor in quicksand. I figured it was some marketing gimmick, maybe free samples or a promotional offer, but the weight and rigidity made me pause. I flipped it over, peeled it open, and let the papers spill onto the floor of my apartment hallway. Hundreds of sheets, maybe 1,000 all-printed text message exchanges between me and Romana. Every typo, every emoji, every late-night rant I'd sent her laid out in black and white. I remember my knees going weak and sliding me down against the door. I blinked at the pages, each one feeling like a punch to the gut. I'd never so much as mentioned our text to anyone else. Hadn't thought twice about the boundaries between us and everyone else. Of course, I'd shown her things I'd never share with my closest friends. Ranted on my roommate, venting over stupid arguments with my mom, embarrassing confessions at 2 a.m. about feeling lost in my own life. Romana had saved everyone, printed them all, and sent them to her entire office. Work the next morning felt like limbo. I walked through the building lobby clutching my purse like a shield, trying to ignore the curious glances. My desk was in an open plan area, and I could already sense the tension. People whispering behind raised coffee mugs, subtle side eyes as I passed. I settled into my chair and spotted a stack of envelopes by the printer, all with my name on them. A sinking realization told me those sheets would soon drop onto every desk in the room. 10 minutes before Romana arrived, the office manager paged me for a quick chat. My chest hammered as I headed to her glass-walled office. She handed me a single sheet of paper, a summary of my messages with the most notable flaws highlighted in red. I stared down at bullet points calling out everything from insecurity, clinginess, dramatic overreactions, to poor communication. Her polite voice droned, asking if I needed support or time off. I nodded dumbly and slipped back to my cubicle. My fingers shook and my coffee stayed untouched. Romana strolled in 15 minutes later, dressed in a crisp blazer and killer heels, clutching a portfolio. She smiled at the receptionist, waved at a few coworkers, and then stopped at my desk. She'd asked to bring her laptop, saying she had something important to share for a project. No red flags there. I'd helped her prepare slides before. But when she set her bag down and opened her portfolio, instead of charts or graphs, she pulled out a binder stuffed with my text printouts. She tapped it once like it was a normal work report. And she looked around at our colleagues, who had by then gathered at the edge of cubicle walls, phones out, whispers spreading like wildfire. My face was burning hot. I felt both numb and furious, but mostly I felt exposed, like someone had stripped off my clothes and handed my secrets to everyone around. With complete calm, she started flipping through the pages, pointing to specific messages. She paused at the one where I confessed to feeling worthless after getting passed over for a promotion. She turned the page and read aloud her own reply, where she tried to comfort me. She showed the sweet text I sent her the next morning, thanking her for being there. Then she paused at another, me freaking out because she was late to our date. She smiled, raised an eyebrow, and tossed the binder onto my desk. I opened my mouth, but my voice got stuck. She stood there, arms folded, looking down at me like she was lecturing a student. In that moment, her office became a stage, and I was the exhibit. No gentle lead-in, no private conversation. Just a public showcase of every time I've been anxious, sad, upset, or needy. Then she spoke. Her tone was clinical. She said she was amazed at how insecure I was, how I spilled every thought to her, then moaned about her no-reply texts for hours. She said she'd printed them all so her coworkers could understand why she never wanted to commit. She said they deserved to see what she'd been put through, that it wasn't fair she'd been stuck cleaning up my emotional mess. She closed her portfolio with a soft click and said she was done. I sat motionless. My cubicle felt smaller, like a glass box I was trapped inside. Someone coughed behind me. A coworker said softly, "Jesus, man." My cheeks stung with every pair of eyes on me. I wanted to rip the pages off my desk, crumple them, set them on fire. But they were laminated in my mind, unirascible evidence of how I let someone see my lowest points. She pivoted sharply and walked away, heels clicking on the tile floor. A few people murmured as she passed. I watched her go, wondering if she even felt guilty. Everyone's phones hovered in the air, recording. It was surreal and emotional, exposed in the open office floor. Later, after the office emptied, I collected the dumped on the floor pages and shoved them into a trash bag. The rustling noise felt like tearing a page from my own diary. I carried that bag to the dumpster behind the building, dumped it, then just stood there, watching the papers flutter and settle among discarded pizza boxes and broken office chairs. The sky was overcast, matching my mood. I leaned against the dumpster, took a shaky breath, and tried not to imagine those messages being read. How coworkers might have judged me, laughed at my vulnerabilities, whispered about it by the water cooler. That night, I sat on my bed with my laptop open, trying to make sense of any comforting words I could write to myself. I drafted an email to HR, threatening to file a complaint for harassment and invasion of privacy, but I hesitated before hitting send. What good would it do? The damage was done. Printing those messages wasn't just a one-off prank. It was a calculated humiliation. The next day, I skipped the elevator and took the stairs to avoid seeing Romana or anyone from the office. My chest tightened with every step. At my desk, some coworkers avoided eye contact. Others stared pointedly at the empty space where the binder had been. I never even saw her again. She transferred departments 2 weeks later, claimed she needed a change of pace. No goodbye note, no sorry if you felt embarrassed, just a swift move to a new team. I realized then that what hurt most wasn't the texts themselves, but the betrayal. The idea that someone I trusted kept a running dossier of my feelings, then weaponized it. I'd always thought vulnerability was strength, that sharing my thoughts with her made us closer. Instead, she used them as ammo. Over the following months, I rebuilt my routine. I started therapy to unpack why I let someone have that kind of power over me. I set firmer boundaries with friends and romantic interests. No more late-night confessions until I was sure of trust. I joined a roller derby league to channel my frustration into something physical. The first practice was brutal. I fell hard and bruised my ribs, but it felt good to hit the track and leave all that office cruelty behind. Sometimes I still get flashbacks. The burst of humiliation when that binder hit my desk, the awkward silences, the recording phones. I catch myself overthinking texts. Will this be used against me? But I'm learning that no one else owns my story. Out my words and my feelings. I choose who gets to read them. And if someone tries to weaponize my vulnerability again, I'll toss their binder in a dumpster without a second thought. That episode with Romana taught me that some people treat emotional intimacy like a trophy or a weapon. But I'm stronger now. I know the difference between sharing to connect and oversharing when trust is fake. I won't let anyone else print my life on a paper and judge me for every line break. I'm done being anyone's show and tell. I remember the morning sun hitting my blinds just wrong, so instead of waking up gently, I shot straight out of bed like I had been kicked. My phone was buried under a pile of half-folded laundry, buzzing like it had a life of its own. I fumbled around until I grabbed it, blinked at the screen, and saw an email from Luke titled, "Important News." My brain went into overdrive. Was he moving? Did we get accepted into that art residency together? None of it prepared me for the sky. By the time I stumbled outside in slippers, the neighborhood was already blinking awake. I stepped onto the cracked sidewalk, phone still clutched in my hand, and looked up. There, scrawled across the blue canvas above my house in giant white letters, was a breakup message. It read, "It's OVR. Find your O in the sky." Below it was a tiny plane towing a banner that fluttered with the rest of the note. "I can't you this anymore. Goodbye." My heart jammed in my chest like someone dropped a third-floor brick on it. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at those clouds partly hiding his words. The banner looped around the sky, drifting toward the next block, and I almost ran after it. But then I looked down at the neat row of townhouses, at the windows where people peeked out, at the cars pulling into driveways. Someone probably captured it on video. Someone was already sharing it on social feeds. I was in a live reality show I hadn't signed up for. A half hour later, my inbox pinged again. A formal email from Luke with bullet points and proper paragraphs, like he drafted a memo instead of telling me he was ending things. He apologized for the public display, sort of, and explained that he thought skywriting would be a memorable way to communicate. He laid out reasons, numbered them, each one phrased like a corporate exit interview. 1. Feeling overwhelmed. 2. Misaligned goals. 3. Need for personal space. I stared at that email, feeling dizzy. His signature block had his full name, phone number, and a link to his portfolio website, as if he thought I'd still need his contact or to admire his art. I pressed my forehead against my front door, phone in hand, mind racing back to every morning we'd spent sipping coffee on that same stoop, plotting out playlists and doodling in our sketchbooks. How did everything go from weekend doodles to giant letters in the sky? It was like someone pressed fast forward and erased the good parts. The rest of the day was a blur. I went back inside to grab a hoodie, but everything felt surreal. My hoodie, his hoodie still hanging in the closet, my own hoodie in the dryer. I could almost hear his voice telling me he'd get it back to me sometime. I shoved a few essentials into a backpack, wallet, keys, a hair tie, and wandered down the block. Neighbors tried to smile or ask if I was okay, but I just waved and kept walking, pretending I knew where I was headed. I ended up at the park where we used to lie on the grass and watch clouds. It seemed fitting, a low-key counterpoint to his dramatic aerial announcement. I found our old spot under the big oak tree, sat on the picnic table bench, and plucked at stray threads on my jeans. The sky looked normal there, no messages, just the same pale blue. A jogger waved. A dog chased a stick. Life went on. My phone buzzed again. Another email from Luke following up, this one with attachments. A PDF of the skywriting contract, Luke's skim-the-surface apology, and an Excel sheet of split-up logistical details. Who keeps what? Turns back the rent for our shared studio. Transfer of subscriptions. It was so precise it gave me chills. I tapped through each one, felt tears slip down my cheeks, but I didn't let them fall. I didn't want anyone to see. I clicked open the skywriting contract first. It had his name as the client and the skywriting company's name below, both stamped with dates and times. The schedule said the plane would fly at 9:30 a.m., exactly over my address, weather permitting. Client agreed to message length no more than 60 characters, it noted. I scrolled down to the signature line. Luke had signed it with a date and a slick little flourish. That flourish felt like a dagger carving into my heart. I closed my eyes, pictured that pilot up there, tracing white smoke into a message about our breakup written above every roof and backyard and windshield within sight. I wondered how many people looked up and thought it was an ad for some edgy new clothing line or a weird performance art piece. Then they'd see the words and realize it was about me. The sun shifted, filtered through the leaves, and I felt a breeze on my neck. I swallowed and forced myself to stand. My legs felt like jelly, but I walked to the park fence and rested my arms on the top rail. I typed a reply to his final email, a single sentence. I told him I got the message. I told him to keep his hoodie. I'd burn it for warmth on nights like this. I hit send, closed my laptop, and just sat there. Evening came with pink and orange fading around the edges of the sky. I walked home slowly, noticing details I'd missed before. The cat sunning itself on a windowsill, the way the wind chime sounded like distant laughter, the graffiti heart someone painted on the corner utility box. Nothing could undo the skywriting, but at least it was over. When I reached my front step, I stood beneath that same sky, now blank. The words were gone, the plane had long since dipped over the horizon, and the cloud banner had dissolved into nothing. I pressed my hand against a brick wall, felt its roughness, and leaned in. There was something comforting about solid ground after air. I opened my front door, stepped my backpack down, and turned on the kitchen light. I found his hoodie draped over the back of a chair, looked at how it slumped there like it was waiting for him to show off. Instead, I walked over, ripped it off the chair, and balled it up. I tossed out the back door into the trash bin, listened for the thud, and felt a weird twist of relief. Later, as I crawled into bed, I imagined the pilot and his plane flying on to the next assignment, drawing letters in someone else's sky. Maybe another town, another person who'd done them wrong. I wondered if they felt anything like I did right now. Then I drifted off, feeling heavy but somehow lighter, knowing that the sky was theirs, not mine, and that I was finally back on the ground. I was scrolling through my midnight feed when a new episode popped up on my podcast app, an episode under my own name. I blinked twice, convinced I was hallucinating. It was 1:02 a.m., and I was halfway through falling asleep, phone balanced on my chest. My thumb hovered over the play button, heart doing a weird flop because I'd never posted a podcast, let alone one with a title like Why Our Love Crashed and Burned. I tapped on it, and that's when the walls of my bedroom felt like they'd started closing in. The voice that came through my earbuds was unmistakably mine. It sounded calm, measured, almost like I was interviewing myself from a distance. The intro music was a soft guitar loop, something I'd never picked for anything. And then it cut right into me laying out every flaw I'd ever had in that relationship. The first segment was me talking about how I'd forgotten his birthday last year. The second was me explaining how I'd spent 3 nights crying over a test grade. The third was me admitting I'd stalked his best friend online when I got jealous. All of it was laid out in graphic detail, mixed with clips of voicemail messages and snippets of him saying my name. At first, I thought maybe someone had hacked my account, but no third-party apps on my phone had access to my microphone. No one knew I'd ever practiced podcasting in my free time, recording mock episodes on dumb topics just to get comfortable. But this episode felt too polished, like someone had edited my voice, spliced in audio recordings from our calls, and sprinkled in commentary that wasn't mine. The narrator, speaking between my segments, said things like she often overanalyzed every word he sent, or her insecurities drove him away. The narrator's tone was sharp, almost cruel. By the time the closing credits rolled, complete with a jingle I'd never heard, I realized that I'd been targeted, and the follow-up email arrived almost immediately. "Hey, listen before we talk. Sophia." That was all it said. No sweet apology. No, I miss you. Just a clip of my own voice telling a story I didn't agree to share. I sat up, the blankets tangled around my waist, and replayed the episode from the start. Each time I thought I recognized a glitch or an odd edit, the narrator would step in and reinforce the narrative. She thought she could handle the distance, but in truth she fell apart. I closed the app and opened my messages to see 3 unread texts from Sophia. "Did you listen? I'm home. If you want to talk, call me." My chest felt heavy, like I'd swallowed a handful of rocks. The next morning, my head felt foggy and my phone was dead. I charged it while making coffee, trying to shake off the weird dream I thought I'd had. But when I opened the app again, the episode was still there with hundreds of downloads by noon. People I barely knew sent me screenshots of the title and asked if I was okay. A classmate I barely spoke to in passing replied to my story update with "that must have hurt." I stared at the download count ticking upward like some twisted scoreboard. I spent the whole morning avoiding my phone. I walked to the coffee shop 2 blocks down, ordered a latte, and texted my friend to meet me. When she showed up 20 minutes later, I was already pacing outside, sipping a cold drink I never finished. I told her what had happened, and she went pale, like she'd just seen me turn into someone else's bad joke. We sat at a corner table, and I replayed the episode for her. She covered her ears half the time, wincing at the narrator's barbs, then leaned in whenever she heard one of my own voice clips. "I can't believe she did this," my friend said, her voice tight. "It's like she turned your life into entertainment." I nodded, my eyes on the window. Outside, people strolled by with their headphones on, oblivious to how our lives could be hijacked in a single file upload. When I got home, the apartment felt too quiet. My laptop was open on the couch, ears of the narrator's voice still echoing in my head. She cried herself to sleep more nights than she'd admit. I shut the laptop and flopped onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. That's when I saw the small SNS notification blinking on my phone, one unread from Sophia. The text read, "We need to talk, I'll explain everything." I hesitated, finger poised above the reply bar. Of course I needed an explanation, but I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it from her. Instead, I texted our mutual friend to see if she knew what was going on. No answer. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a void I didn't understand. By afternoon, my anxiety was off the charts. I decided I had to confront Sophia in person. I called her, and she picked up on the first ring, sounding calm, almost rehearsed. "Did you hear it?" she asked. I swallowed. "Yes," I said quietly. "What is this?" She sighed, then launched into a long monologue about feeling unheard in our relationship, about wanting to share her side with friends and family, but not knowing how. She said she'd recorded me venting, then hired someone to edit an episode so people could grasp what it was like being with me. She claimed it was an honest project, a kind of relationship diary. Before she dropped the bombshell, she didn't love me anymore. I sat on my bed, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her list reasons like bullet points in a slideshow. "You're always so sensitive," she said. "You overthink everything. I wanted to help you see it too." She told me she emailed the podcast link to everyone she knew, then calmly said she was moving out that weekend. She didn't apologize. She said, "This is how I'm ending it." Then she hung up. I stared at my wall, tears unbidden slipping down my cheeks. I thought of the episode title, the clips of me crying, the narrator mocking my mistakes. I felt exposed, terrified that people would think less of me, that they'd judge me for spilling my feelings. But most of all, I felt used, like I'd been the subject of someone else's art piece without consent. The next day, I woke up early and drafted a private journal entry, page after page of raw emotion I'd never share with anyone. Writing felt safer than speaking. I wrote about how it hurt to realize someone you trust could weaponize your words. I wrote about how every failed relationship had left a mark, but this one felt like a public scar. I wrote down everything I wanted to say to Sophia, but I knew I'd never send it. After that, I returned to the podcast app and hit record. I clicked through the options, harassment, invasion of privacy, and submitted a complaint. It felt petty, maybe futile, but I needed to try. I logged out of the app and deleted it from my phone. I have installed every social app where she might have shared the episode. I posted a story telling people to ignore that link if they saw it. No details, just a plea to stop spreading her narrative. Over the next few days, my feed was flooded with reposts of the episode title. People saying, "Wow, that's intense. Did you hear her side?" I refused to click. I reminded myself that my side was real life, not a curated audio file. I spent the weekend at my cousin's house, binging movies with no headphones and no expectations. I sat on her couch, ate popcorn, and let myself laugh at stupid comedies. It felt foreign but good. By the end of the week, the episode was buried under newer content. The download count plateaued and people moved on. I still got the occasional text asking if I was okay, and I answered as honestly as I could. "I'm fine. I'm healing." It wasn't a lie. I was fine, even if scars remained. One night, I found myself back in my room, ready for bed. I realized I didn't need to record a rebuttal or launch my own podcast to set the record straight. My real life, quiet dinners with friends, late night drives with the windows down, good sleep with no buzzing notifications, was the story that mattered. The story Sophie tried to tell was just one angle, edited and sold as drama. My story was me, unedited and unfiltered, living day by day, and that was enough. I decided to grab dinner at the new taco truck park on Elm Street after class, thinking a quick bite and some music from the live DJ would be a chill way to unwind. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and I felt that easy buzz of a Friday evening rolling into the weekend. I'd ordered a fish taco and grabbed one of those neon green plastic chairs at a picnic table when I saw Dylan stroll in with that familiar half smile, like he was about to surprise me. Even though I hadn't heard from him all week, my heart flipped because I thought it was going to be a good surprise. I waved him over, forgetting that tacos are messy, and he slid onto the bench next to me like nothing was off. He smelled like coconut-scented lotion and something fresh, like after a haircut. We talked about midterms, my upcoming road trip, that stupid group project I was dreading. Then, without warning, the DJ cut the music and the lights dimmed. For a second, I thought it was a power glitch, but then I saw them. A cluster of strangers holding signs that said things like, "She's insecure, he can't keep up. Watch her freak out." They were all staring at me, and my stomach dropped so hard it felt like my lungs might cave in. I stood up, and before I could even think, the strangers broke into synchronized moves. They danced in a loose circle around the picnic tables, waving those signs in the air. I could hear snippets of the speech being read aloud, words I had never agreed to share. Dylan stood at the edge of the crowd, holding a microphone. I felt like I was in some weird film festival submission no one told me about. Every eye in the park turned to us, the crowd partying like water around a rock. They chanted lines that sounded like they were ripped from our worst fights. "She needs attention," "Can't handle a text left unread," "Jealousy" scrawled in big letters. I recognized the phrasing because it was almost verbatim from some of our arguments, only it was edited into neat bullet points, like a bad presentation. My hands shook so badly I dropped my taco, and the hot sauce splattered onto the pavement. None of it made sense because none of it was true in the way it was being framed. Dylan clicked his tongue and stepped forward. He leaned into the mic and cleared his throat, like he was introducing the main act at an open mic night. "I've thought about us nonstop," he said. His voice sounded weirdly practiced, and I realized I can't keep carrying this relationship on my back. The dancers froze mid-step, signs in the air, waiting for him to continue. I wanted to yell to tell him to shut up, but my voice was gone. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. He went on about how my insecurities had weighed him down, about how I overreacted when he went out with friends without telling me. He said I created drama out of nothing, and all of it was spelled out in this public performance. There were no apologies, no "I miss you," no "I made mistakes too." Just a cold declaration, delivered like a sales pitch. This is why I'm ending it. The dancers started moving again, this time stepping back and letting him stand alone in the middle. It circled him, signs drooping, and he read a prepared statement. The words rang in my ears. I found someone who doesn't need a script for a breakup. I looked at the sign that read "script" and thought it was a cruel joke. Then the dancers began to fold their signs and exit one by one as if they were done with their part in the spectacle. I felt too small for the sky. The taco truck engine idled in the background. The DJ still looked stunned, and a few late-night strollers stopped to film. I tried to pull myself together, but my legs wouldn't hold me upright. Dylan dropped the mic, no dramatic flourish, just a soft thunk against the wooden bench. He turned away and walked back toward the truck he'd come in. The dancers melted into the crowd, leaving me mid-table with empty seats all around. I buried my face in my hands, shoulders shaking. A taco sat forgotten, half-eaten, a casualty of whatever twisted show I'd just starred in. I could hear someone whisper, "What the hell is going on?" And that made me look up. Faces peered through the haze of string lights. Curious, confused, maybe even pitying. My cheeks burned and I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to disappear, to teleport back to my dorm, to erase those words from the sky. When the last dancer had vanished, Dylan's car door slammed shut. He backed the vehicle out and drove off without looking back. The engine sound faded, and for a moment the park was quiet again. Then the DJ tapped the mic, static crackling, and said, "Hey everyone, sorry about that." He tried to restart the music, but it felt flat. No one moved. No one clapped. We all just stared at the spot where Dylan had stood, as if replaying the scene in our heads. I gathered my things, napkins stuck to my jeans, my phone, my purse, and shoved them into my bag. My taco chair clattered as I scooted it back. I didn't want to stay another second. I could feel people's eyes as I walked through the tables, a tight knot in my chest. I felt like I was dripping shame, and every drop hit the ground with a tiny splash. Outside, the evening air was cool, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. I exhaled, and it came out in a shaky burst. Music from a passing car floated through the air, some old love song that felt like a mockery. I walked toward campus without a plan, steps echoing on the sidewalk. I passed students laughing over coffee, a couple arguing over directions, a group of friends taking selfies. None of them knew what kind of performance had just played out. I ended up on the hillside overlooking the city lights. I sat in the grass, backpack on my lap, and stared at the glow. My phone buzzed with unknown numbers. Videos of the flash mob, captions like, "Did you see that?" and "Poor girl." I deleted them all without watching. My fingers hovered over Dylan's contact. Should I call him? Text him? Block him? My thumb hovered over block, but then moved away. Instead, I texted my best friend. I needed her. She replied immediately, "On my way." I sat there until she showed up, pacing through the grass. When she found me, she wrapped her arms around me without saying a word. I let the tears come because I needed them. We sat side by side, her jacket over my shoulders, looking out at the city. It felt peaceful in a way, like the world was still spinning even if mine had stopped. The next morning, I woke up with a fuzzy headache and a phone full of missed calls. I deleted Dylan's number before I even looked at the messages. There was nothing left to say. I spent the day in sweatpants, binge-watching comfort shows, letting my friend bring me snacks. I didn't want to think about the flash mob, the signs, the sound of that mic drop. Later, I wrote in my journal about all of it, date, time, every detail. I wrote until the words blurred on the page. I wrote that I was done being a side quest in someone else's drama. I wrote that I was reclaiming my weekdays, my weekends, my texts, my tears. I wrote that no one would ever get to choreograph my feelings again. And when I closed the journal, I knew that was the last scene Dylan would ever write in my life. I was going to live the story my way from now on. I was scrolling through my morning feed with a mug of cold coffee in hand when I saw it, a notification from Karen's blog. My heart stuttered because I hadn't checked her posts in weeks. I thought we were doing okay after our last fight about weekend plans. Then I noticed the title of her latest entry, "Is He Worthy of My Love?" My stomach twisted into knots as I clicked the link and saw a huge poll front and center with two options in bold, absolutely and not even close. Below, real-time percentages were flipping, 60% against me. I stared at the screen, mouth dry, coffee forgotten. I tried to scroll down for context, but the next paragraph was already drilled into my head. Thank you to everyone who voted. Final tally will be revealed at noon. Stay tuned. No explanation of what I had done wrong, no private message to me, just a public vote on my value as her boyfriend. Comments were pouring in. Tell her the truth. This is brutal. She needs help. And he cheated, right? I felt like someone had poured acid in my veins. That afternoon, I tried texting her, but my messages bounced back with that dreaded scene mark and no reply. I sat in the library, laptop open, pretending to work, but every nerve in my body was on fire. I kept hitting refresh on her blog, watching the percentages climb against me. I should have known something was off when she'd sent me a selfie that morning with the caption, "Excited for today." Now I saw why. At 11:45 a.m., I left campus and walked toward her apartment, mind racing with scenarios on how to break this up before the final tally. But when I arrived, I noticed she left her door unlocked. I stepped inside, found her laptop on the coffee table, and saw the poll results sitting at 83%, not even close. My chest clenched so tight I thought I'd pass out. Just then, her door swung open and she walked in wearing a crisp blouse, hair perfectly styled. She dropped her bag and didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she opened her laptop and hit publish results. A new post popped up with a big red banner, "You lost." Under it, Karen had scrawled a lengthy explanation of how my lackluster texting, failure to remember her coffee order, and inability to commit had led her to outsource the breakup decision to an online audience. She clicked around to show me the detailed breakdown, votes by friends, coworkers, even strangers from some subreddit. I felt like I'd been dissected alive. She turned the screen so I could see things up close. Pie chart, bar graph, comments in a sidebar. One comment read, "I vote no. He seems lazy." Another said, "She deserves better." I swallowed hard and managed a shaky, "Why would you do this?" She shrugged, eyes cold. "I wanted honesty," she said. "This is as honest as it gets." She closed the laptop with a snap and leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms. I felt like the floor had dropped out. Everything I'd done, surprising her with breakfast sandwiches, sitting through her 3-hour kitten videos, picking up her favorite ice cream on late nights, apparently didn't matter. What mattered was that strangers didn't think I was worthy. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My mind flashed through all those low moments I cherished. Our first apartment hunt, the time we got lost on that hiking trail, her laugh when I tried to cook spaghetti. None of it registered in that poll. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street. "I need someone who people can see is worth it," she said, without turning around. "I need validation." I felt my hands clench into fists. "You're asking strangers to decide our relationship," I whispered. She finally faced me, eyebrows raised. "They know me better than you do," she said. I recoiled as if she'd slapped me. I stumbled back, knocking a stack of books off the coffee table. They hit the floor loud, a drum roll in that silent room. I bent down, picked them up, but each book felt heavier than the last. I remembered the nights I'd stayed up reading her favorite novel so we could discuss it over breakfast. None of that mattered if the public thought I was worthless. I set the books on the couch and stood. "So this is it. You're breaking up with me because of some internet poll." My voice sounded brittle. She nodded slowly, gaze steady. "It's the fairest way I know." I shook my head as tears burned behind my eyes. "You turned us into a popularity contest." She sighed. "That's life." I didn't argue anymore. I walked to her bedroom and grabbed my jacket from the closet. She watched me move, but didn't help her say goodbye. I slipped my arms in and looked around, our photos on the wall, the plant I'd watered every Tuesday, the coffee table where I'd spilled my latte on day one. It all felt like someone else's life. Before I left, I knelt by the laptop and typed one final comment on her blog post under "You lost." "I'm more than a number." Then I hit enter. She would see it later, but it wouldn't matter. It was just words in a sea of opinions. Outside, the air felt crisp and startlingly honest. I took a deep breath, listening to traffic and distant laughter. My phone buzzed with social media alerts, friends checking if I was okay, people asking why Karen would do such a thing. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked until the city skyline rose into view, feeling the weight of that poll slip a little. A few days later, I ran into a mutual friend at the coffee shop. She told me Karen had taken down her blog, emptied the comments, and posted a vague apology about needing time to reflect. No mention of me, no admission of what she'd done. But I felt something shift inside. The poll was gone, the banner vanished, and the world seemed quieter. I realized that letting strangers decide my worth was both her mistake and my release. I wasn't going to chase her validation. I'd let her guests at the unkind breakup party go home without waiting for a cake. Our worth wasn't a percentage in a poll, It was every messy, genuine moment I'd lived. That night, I poured a fresh cup of coffee, pulled out my journal, and wrote down all the things I liked about myself: loyalty, weird jokes, caring too hard. I listed the memories I didn't need to prove because I owned them. When I closed the journal, I felt lighter. The only pull I needed was the one inside me. The smoke from the grill hit me before I even stepped off Michael's front porch, a mix of charred burgers and sweet corn bathing the backyard in that summer night scent. His family's lawn chairs were scattered under string lights, kids chasing the sprinklers, and Aunt Marcy was already hollering about potato salad being just right. I was halfway through my first paper for the semester, stressed out, and this invitation felt like a lifeline. I figured we'd hang out, eat hot dogs, laugh at my burnt marshmallow attempts. Instead, I ended up at the worst roast of my life. I carried a paper plate piled high with ribs and baked beans to where Michael was flitting steak. He looked proud, like he'd somehow tamed the fire. He handed me a beer, my first legal one, and clinked cans with me. We talked about my internship, his new job, even joked about our old prom nightmares. The whole scene felt so normal that when his mom called him over to help with a cake aisle display for dessert, I didn't think twice. I wandered toward the picnic table where a massive sheet cake sat under a rainbow umbrella. It should have been that blue and white family reunion cake I'd expected, but the frosting was bright pink and the sheet was covered with two giant edible photos. One of his stunned face from 4 weeks ago when I surprised him on his birthday, and one of me grinning like an idiot at the beach last summer. Between our faces and icing he piped in big cursive, "Thanks for the memories, goodbye." I froze mid-step, plate in hand. Aunt Marcy gasped. Cousins tipped their heads like confused puppies. Michael stood off to the side, arms crossed, an expression half proud, half sheepish. His little sister ran up, grabbed a forkful, and said, "What flavor is this?" before her mom pulled her away. I stood there, mouth open, baking beans caught in my hand like a signaling flag. The backyard laughter and clinking plates stopped. Grill smoke hovered like a shame halo around me. Michael's dad patted his shoulder. "Nice touch, son," he said, leafing through a stack of paper plates to find the ones with our faces. "Personalized breakup cake," he laughed. Someone passed out cake-sized disposable plates, all printed with our photos. I looked at him, my cheeks burning hotter than the coals. I raised my voice, quieter than I wanted but loud enough for the kitchen window full of aunties and uncles to hear. "Is this a joke?" The way he smirked made me sick. He stepped closer. "It's real," he said. "I figure you need a sweet reminder that we're done." That single sentence felt like a lawnmower across my chest. I wanted to shout, to fling the whole cake off the table, wipe that frosting off my face, but I just stood there staring at the tablecloth dotted with pink crumbs. His brother tried to break the tension by grabbing a slice. "I'll take one for the team," he joked, but everyone just paused. Someone handed the slice to me, and I took it like a robot, plastic fork in hand, cake wobbling. I stared at the crumbly edges, the way the icing spelled me out in fake frosting script, and felt a rush of injustice. Michael's mother cleared her throat, eyes glistening like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. She said, "Honey, are you all right?" I nodded, barely stuck on stunned. After what felt like an eternity, I ripped the plate from the table, dumped the slice in the grass, and spit out a mouthful of cake. The taste was sickly sweet, like humiliation mixed with powdered sugar. The family murmured. I dropped the plate, turned on my heel, and walked past the lilac bushes, a pair of cousins playing cornhole, pretending none of this was happening. Outside the backyard gate, the breeze felt cool against my face. I texted my best friend to meet me at the corner store. I could feel eyes on my back, neighbors peeking through blinds, kids running after me calling my name. I didn't answer. I just pushed past the garden gnome and onto the sidewalk. At the corner store, I hunched over a slushy machine, my hands trembling as I crushed ice into a styrofoam cup. My phone buzzed with messages, friends asking if I was okay, Michael's name popping up over and over. I blocked him on everything, phone, social apps, my mind. I downed half the slushy in one gulp, realized it tasted like cherry tears, and tossed it in the trash. I walked back home under the streetlights, my head fuzzy, wondering how someone you shared inside jokes and half-finished novels with could turn a family party into your breakup stage. I passed the barbecue glow in the distance, could still hear faint laughter, but it felt wrong now, like a carnival mirror reflecting the worst version of me. When I got home, I flopped onto my bed and rubbed my eyes. I remember the cake table, how Michael's grin looked triumphant, how his family clapped like it was the best dessert reveal ever. I pictured that cake cut up, served smile by sugar-coated smile, my face on a paper plate like dinnerware. I closed my eyes, felt tears slip down but didn't wipe them. I didn't have any why left to ask. The next morning the whole thing felt like a weird fever dream. Pink icing filling the grass, cousins whispering outside my window. I read the text I'd ignored. I'm sorry. It was supposed to be funny. Can we talk? My thumb hovered over reply but landed on delete chat. I needed a fresh start, one without scrapbooked breakup cake or audience applause. I headed to the local park with my sketchbook. I sat on a bench, drew the outline of a cake, no faces, no words, just layers and swirls. I filled in the frosting with neat lines and left space in the middle like a void waiting to be filled. I sketched myself walking away from the table, boots stomping through grass instead of picking up a slice. I drew the breeze carrying icing crumbs away. When I looked down at the page, it didn't have that sugar-sweet sting to it. It felt clean, hopeful. I didn't need to bake another cake in Michael's honor. Didn't need a performance art piece to announce my freedom. I could flip the page and draw something new. Maybe a sunrise, maybe a pizza, maybe an entirely different life chapter without anyone selling slices of me. I tore the sketch out, crumpled it, then smoothed it back into a neat bundle. I tucked it into my backpack, closed the lid of the bench, and walked on. The smell of grilling drifted from a distant yard, but I didn't flinch. Next time someone offered me cake, I'd say thanks, but I'd pass on the broken pieces. I'd take my desserts and my heartbreaks behind closed doors, where nobody could turn them into a show. I was halfway through my shift at the coffee cart outside the art museum, juggling orders and memorizing the foam art names when my phone buzzed. It was Amanda. The text read, urgent. Need you now, followed by a location pin for Mercy General Hospital. My stomach did a weird flip because I'd seen her messages before when she was hungover or upset about a bad dream, but never like this. The clock read 4:12 p.m., and the museum crowds were thinning out. I wiped my hands on my apron and grabbed my bike helmet, tossing the keys on the counter. I didn't even lock up. I just rode off before I could think twice. I pedaled like I was in one of those reach your destination races, weaving around tourists snapping selfies with statues. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Did she cramp up after that hiking trip last week? Was it something serious with her heart condition she never talked about? Sweat beaded at my hairline, mixing with the sun on my neck. By the time I skidded to a stop in front of the emergency entrance, I was gasping. I locked my bike to the rack and sprinted inside, weeding through wheelchairs and rushing nurses, following signs that blinked emergency in red. The waiting room was half empty, chairs lined in stiff rows, magazines scattered on the floor. I spotted the triage desk and strode up, panting out her name. The nurse gave me a calm look, asked if I was family. I said, yes, and she handed me a pink wristband and directed me to room 4B. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and old coffee, the buzzing fluorescent lights above making everything feel unreal. I walked in, saw her in the hospital gown, slumped against the pillows, eyes closed. An IV bag dripped clear fluid, and monitor beeped in short, steady pulses. Amanda, I said softly, stepping closer. She blinked, looked at me with what I thought was relief, but her face was pale, strange somehow, like the person I knew dialed down her color to grayscale. Nurses bustled by, asking questions about allergies and next of kin. I answered as best I could, feeling like I was in some medical drama where my part was to look confused and worried. The doctor poked in, said she had chest pains, but nothing to worry about. They were running tests. I nodded, heart in my throat. I pulled up a chair next to her bed and reached for her hand. It felt cool, clammy. What happened? I asked, voice catching. She looked at me, lips twitching like she was about to cry or laugh. I couldn't tell which. She said, thank you, in this soft, barely there voice, then closed her eyes again. I stared at the ceiling tiles, willing the test to come back negative, ready to tell her I'd drive her home, make ramen, binge bad movies with her until she felt better. An hour passed. I read a pamphlet about stress management. I played a game on my phone. I watched the clock tick from 5:15 to 5:42. Then the nurse came in, unplugged her IV, and started removing the leads from her chest. All clear. She's fine, the nurse said. I exhaled so hard it hurt my lungs. I'd wasted my entire evening worrying. I looked at Amanda, expecting a groggy apology, a hug, something. Instead, she sat up and held out an envelope, thick and heavy. No mark, just my name scrawled on the front. I frowned. "What's this?" I asked. She patted the bed beside her, so I put the envelope down on my lap. I turned the corner edge, slid out a folded letter. My heart pounded again because her handwriting was familiar, each loop and line carrying a memory. I unfolded it and started reading. "Dear Noah, I'm sorry you dropped everything to rush here. I know you care about me, and that's exactly why I had to do this. I can't keep feeling like I'm dying just to get your attention. Our relationship has been a series of emergencies. You rushing over, me pretending it's serious, then it never really being about me. I've thought it through and I'm tired of the fake scares and the late night texts begging for reassurance. I don't love you anymore. Please don't follow me. I'm walking away." My vision blurred, the letter pages spinning in my hands. I looked up at her, saw no tears, just that odd half smile like she'd pulled off a magic trick. I blinked, heart slamming against my ribs. "Wait, you faked all this." My voice cracked. She nodded, eyes fixed on the wall beyond me. I staged it. I knew you'd come. That sentence felt like someone walking on my chest. I ripped the letter to pieces. Small white squares fluttered like snow around her bed. A nurse peered in and frowned. I shoved the scraps in my pocket, stood up, and took a step back. "Why?" I asked, though I already knew it was selfish. She sighed, stood up too, gown slipping off one shoulder. "I wanted you to see how it felt. It's not enough to say I don't love you. I had to make you want to fix me so I could leave for real." I ran my fingers through my hair, angry tears stinging my eyes. I thought about the panic I'd felt, the fear that she might die, and how that fear was my anchor to her. But this wasn't love, it was obsession. She watched me, expression unreadable. The doctor came back in with test results, called her the lucky one, said she could go home. She thanked him and turned to me. "I'm leaving now," she said. I nodded, too stunned to argue. I walked out of room 4B without looking at her again. The fluorescent lights felt harsher on the way out. I passed families waiting for real emergencies, kids crying, people on phones calling loved ones. I stuck my hands in my pockets, touching the lettered scraps, each one a memory shredded. I reached the exit, paused, and exhaled a shaky breath. Outside, the cool evening air wrapped around me smelled of exhaust and fresh grass from the hospital lawn. I took out my phone and deleted her texts, then her number. I didn't want the messages piling back up, trapping me in that loop of urgent and fake emergency, and you still care. I walked toward my bike, leaned it against the rack, and rode off without looking back. The lights of the hospital faded behind me, and with each pedal stroke, I felt the weight lift a little. Later, when I got home, I found an empty coffee mug on my desk, the one I'd meant to clean up before work. I looked at it, thinking of Amanda's letter lying in pieces in some trash can at the hospital. I realized I'd been patient sitting for someone who did need saving. I filled the mug with water and rinsed it under the sink. The water ran clear, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the panic ebb away. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I wouldn't rush for any more emergencies that weren't real. My heart stuttered the way it does when you see something you shouldn't. I was idling at the stoplight on Cedar Avenue, staring at the billboard above the gas station, and my jaw dropped. There it was, our argument, in huge block letters stretching across the sky. Lines I'd never wanted to see printed anywhere, let alone towering over my morning commute. I slammed on the brakes, cars honking behind me, and leaned forward in my seat to read the first panel. "You've never listened to me." Below it, in smaller type, "I'm tired of repeating myself." Then another frame. "Why do you always assume the worst?" Each sentence felt like a punch to the gut, but worse, it was public. Drivers leaned out their windows, pointing and taking pictures. A jogger paused mid-stride, staring out as if hypnotized. The sun glinted off the glossy vinyl, making the words almost gleam with malice. I sat frozen for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I wanted to rip the billboard down with my bare hands. I typed a text to him. "What the hell?" and hit send waiting for a reply that never came. When the light finally changed, I stayed put. Didn't move an inch until the line of cars behind me began blasting their horns. I shifted into drive, peeled away, and parked 2 blocks over, heart hammering like I'd sprinted a mile. I walked back on foot, passing convenience stores and coffee shops, but all I could see was that billboard. Each phrase burned into my mind. I deserve better. This is my last warning. Please don't follow me. It read like a bad breakup script, and a public shaming rolled into one. My face felt hot, like it had been splashed with scalding water. I tried to blink the tears away, but they slid down anyway. By the time I reached the corner beneath the sign, my phone buzzed. I looked down to see his message. Meet me here at 8:15. I'll explain. I stared at the clock on my dashboard, 8:03. 5 minutes to go. I paced on the cracked sidewalk, avoiding eye contact with strangers who were craning their necks. What was he thinking? Why would he do this? At exactly 8:15 a.m., he strolled up wearing his usual denim jacket and that crooked grin that used to make me melt. But today his smile looked different. Cold, rehearsed, like he practiced on his way over. I stopped walking and stared at him. He nodded once and gestured upward toward the billboard. Then he cleared his throat. I needed you to see this, he said, voice steady. I wanted you to understand how it felt. I shook my head, furious. You humiliated me. You splashed my private pain across the city. He sighed, as though I were the one making this difficult. I had to do it publicly so you finally get it. You always claimed you didn't know how bad it was. I folded my arms. We argued like any couple. That doesn't give you the right to turn the highway into our therapy session. He lifted a hand. This wasn't therapy. This was closure. He pointed at the next panel. I've said it 1,000 times. I'm done. Then he looked at me. I've rented this for a week. I wanted people to know I'm moving on. I swallowed. People on the street had stopped to watch us. Flashy breakup billboard and 2 X's mid-scene. I could feel her eyes peeling at my skin like I was some exhibit. Closure? I echoed. You think this is closure? I could barely get the words out without shaking. He nodded. I thought if I made it loud enough, it wouldn't echo in my mind anymore. He looked up at the sign, then back at me. And I wanted you to see how people react when they read something so raw. You talk about how you can handle anything, but you back down at the first sign of judgment. I bit my lip, tasting blood. He was twisting this around on me. This was never about judgment. It was about you turning my private moments into public headlines. He glanced at the busy intersection where cars slowed to rubberneck. Maybe you needed to be slowed down. Then he took a step closer, lowering his voice. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to say goodbye. I wiped my cheek with the back of my hand. Is that your speech? Because you should have just texted me instead of buying a billboard. He hesitated, flicking his gaze back to towering letters above. I wanted it to matter. I wanted to make you feel it as I did. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You've already made me feel more than enough. I took a shaky breath. So this is it. He nodded, folding his arms. Yeah, it's it. For a long moment, we just stood there under that massive sign, traffic rushing by, birds swooping through the letters like they were ornithological tourists. Then he turned on his heel and walked away, his footsteps echoing against the pavement. I watched until he disappeared around the corner, my chest hollow. After he was gone, I looked up one last time. The billboard still blared at me. Good luck without me, the final line read. I spat on my palm and wiped at the bottom right corner of the sign, as if trying to erase those words with spit. Of course it didn't work. I took out my phone and snapped a picture, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted proof that this moment existed. No filter, no gloss, just me and that giant confession overhead. Then I turned away and walked back to my car, parking 2 blocks down so I wouldn't have to look at it anymore. That afternoon, friends texted me screenshots of the billboard. Some offered sympathy. Others joked about the soap opera move. I ignored them all. When evening came, I drove the same route back home. The billboard was still there, right where it was this morning, staring at me. I rolled down my window as I passed, but I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I realized I couldn't unsee what he'd done, but I could choose not to let it define me. I flicked my phone off and pulled onto the side street leading to my apartment. I parked, reached over to lock the doors, and took a deep breath. The billboard loomed in the distance, but its harsh light felt softer now, like a bad dream fading with the daylight. I walked inside, closed my door, and shut out the world. No giant letters, no traffic. Just the silence I've been craving since that morning. And for the first time, I felt free of the message he'd splashed across my life. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop and thought maybe it was a prank or a flash sale gone viral. When I finally squinted at the screen, every notification was a video clip from Luna. I'd gone to bed thinking we were on decent terms after that awkward brunch, but by sunrise she'd already launched her little skywriting stunt. I scrambled out of bed, heart pounding, and raced to my window. What I saw next felt like someone had tied my stomach in knots. Above the old brick bakery where we shared our first weekend coffee, white smoke letters trailed across the sky. Thank you for the memories. I pinched myself, staring at the message looping over my neighborhood. It was too big to ignore, too public, too specifically for me. I threw on clothes, tripped over my sneakers, and bolted out the front door. Neighbors in pajamas were pointing up, cameras out. I sprinted down the sidewalk toward the bakery, breathing hard, not sure if I was angry, confused, or trying to figure out if I missed some giant joke. When I reached the storefront, the baker himself had come out, wiping flour off his apron. He peered up, laughed, and said, "Quite the romantic, huh?" I muttered something about not finding it cute and kept moving. Next, I saw another clip from Luna, a shaky wide-angle shot of the park where we used to lie under the oak tree. Sure enough, white against blue sky spelled out, "Remember June 5th? I froze mid-step, recalling that afternoon when she confessed she liked me for real, when she'd sat in silence watching ducks. I closed my eyes and let that memory wash over me like a wave. Warm sunshine, her head on my shoulder, my heart feeling too big. My phone buzzed again. She'd sent a time-stamped video of the Skyrider's plane climbing higher, the pilot's silhouette behind the smoke trails. Then came the text, "Watch for the final message." My pulse thumped harder. I zipped down the narrow alley that led to the old mural wall she painted for me last year. When I stepped into the clearing, I looked up just in time to see letters swirling into. "Sorry I couldn't stay." The cursive smoke faded slowly, and for a moment the whole world stood still. I closed my eyes, blinked rapid fire, then reached into my pocket for Luna's last voicemail. It was time-stamped 3 days ago. "I think I need space," she'd said, her voice trembling. I never answered. I thought I had more time to figure out what she really meant. Now the messages in the sky felt like final exam results with no curve. I wandered toward the pier where we used to watch the sunset, each step echoing guilt. At the end of the boardwalk, where the lights peeked through the dusk, I looked up again. There was one more. I'm moving on. That message sliced through me like a knife. The plane circled once and peeled away, leaving nothing but wispy trails. My phone lit up with her behind-the-scenes clips, meeting the pilot, watching the smoke dissipate, Luna smiling as she filled it all. No apology, no hope for salvage. She'd spent days, maybe weeks planning this aerial breakup, and had been none the wiser. I scrolled back through the texts she'd sent, polite, small talk, nothing hinting at skywriting heartbreak. I stood there for a long time, wind whipping my hair, staring at the empty sky. It felt surreal to watch the very place I'd once painted our future now read like a final chapter. I felt like I was stranded in a scene I didn't audition for, my name signed off in smoke and wind. When I finally shook myself, I realized people had stopped to watch, couples holding hands, joggers pausing, a little kid pointing at nothing. Everyone took videos, laughed, or gossiped. I felt naked, like someone had peeled away my privacy and left me exposed. I slid my phone back into my pocket and turned away, footsteps heavy on the wooden planks. On the walk home, every corner reminded me of something we did together. The coffee shop with the mismatched chairs, the corner bench where we carved our initials, the street lamp we stood under in that sudden rainstorm. It was like replaying a playlist on shuffle, each memory hitting me in reverse order until there was nothing but silence. By the time I reached my apartment, my legs felt like jelly. I collapsed on the couch and stared at my own ceiling, replaying Luna's sky messages in my mind. "Thank you for the memories. Remember June 5th? Sorry I couldn't stay." I'm moving on. Each one dredged out a place we'd both loved, now marked as territory she was reclaiming without me. My phone buzzed once more. This time it wasn't Luna but my best friend texting. "Did you see? Are you okay?" I tapped out a quick reply. I'll call you later. I couldn't type more. Didn't want to admit how right she was about me living in the past. I peeled myself off the couch and grabbed a pen and notebook. I wrote down every note in the sky, every place, every memory it dredged up. I scribbled until my hand cramped, then looked at the page. It was a map of heartbreak, but it was also proof that I'd known her in all those moments, that my life had been full of shared laughter and late-night tacos. Luna's stunt hurt like hell, but it also forced me to see our journey from above, like I was the pilot of my own heart, and the smoke in the sky showed me where I'd gone wrong. I realized I'd been clinging to hope even when she'd been slipping away. Maybe she needed something dramatic to break free. Maybe I needed skywriting to finally wake up. Later that night, I stood on the roof of my building looking up at the stars. No smoke, no messages, just dark sky dotted with points of light. I took a deep breath and said out loud, "Thank you for the memories." It felt strange to borrow her words, but it was the only truth I could muster. I lifted my face to the sky, letting the cool air fill my lungs, and whispered goodbye. I went inside, closed the rooftop door behind me, and left the notebook on the windowsill. Tomorrow I'd erase the chalkboard of our places, grab coffee alone, skip the mural wall, avoid the pier at sunset. The sky above me would remain blank, waiting for me to write a new story, and that quieter sky felt like the first light of something honest. I was dodging my morning commute crowd when I noticed a giant countdown clock blinking on the plaza screen outside the transit hub. It wasn't a train schedule or a promo for the weekend festival, just a glaring timer ticking down from 3 hours. I slowed my pace, squinting at the harsh white numbers against a black background. People were gathering on the steps, whispering and checking their phones like they were at some weird pop-up event. My stomach did a flip because I knew Atticus had a flair for drama, but this felt next level. I hovered by a coffee cart, curiosity pulling me closer. The clock read 2 hours and 57 minutes now, relentless as a heartbeat. I tapped my friend Mina's shoulder next to me. "You know what's up with that?" She shook her head, ponytail swinging. "No clue." Atticus didn't text me. I frowned. He'd asked me to meet him here for coffee next week. Nothing about a countdown. My throat tightened as I realized the date and time on the clock matched exactly the moment we'd first said, "I love you," under the same screen 9 months ago. I checked my phone for any messages from him. Nothing. My heartbeat thudded loud enough that I could almost hear it over the murmur of the growing crowd. The timer hit 2 hours when a ringtone crackled through the plaza speakers, a sound I'd never heard. Everyone looked around, phones at the ready. I pulled mine out, hoping for an explanation, but my screen was blank. As the clock slipped to 1 hour and 50 minutes, someone in the crowd gasped, pointing at a small live stream window that popped up in the corner of the plaza screen. I looked up just in time to see Atticus' face, pale and serious, eyes darting off camera. He wore a collared shirt that hung loose at the neck. A subtitle appeared below him. Atticus' live stream countdown. I felt like someone had yanked the rug out from under me. A hush fell over the plaza as he cleared his throat. "Hey," his voice echoed through the speakers, sounding hollow. "If you're watching this, it means you saw the countdown. At 0, I'll be live from this spot." His gaze flicked to the clock. "I need you all here, especially you." My cheeks flushed. I wanted to bolt, hide in the subway tunnels, but my legs stayed glued to the concrete. Atticus looked right into the camera like he was staring at me. My breath caught. "I've set this timer because I can't keep doing this behind closed doors." He mouthed the words, but the subtitles spelled them out. I deserve honesty. People around me exchanged nervous glances. A few applauded, thinking it was some art performance. I wanted to shout that it was my relationship he was airing out for everyone to see. The clock ticked to 1 hour. Atticus' face disappeared, replaced by another message: "FAQs will be answered live." Then it switched back, showing him leaning forward, hands clasped. I felt a jolt of panic. What questions would he put out there? Would he quiz me? Expose our fights, my darkest insecurities? Half an hour in, my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from him. "Don't be late." That was it. No emojis, no explanation. My chest constricted. I typed back, "What are you doing?" That message hung unsent. I realized I'd turned my phone off on purpose. There were too many eyes watching. At 20 minutes to 0, the plaza felt electric. A few tourists snapped photos. A street vendor closed his stand to see better. I edged closer to the front, my pulse jittery, adrenaline rushing. The clock read 10 minutes and counting. My mind replayed every argument we had about trust, about him canceling plans, about me being too clingy. Had he decided to broadcast it all? When the timer hit 0, a countdown beep cut through the plaza, drawing a collective intake of breath. The big screen flickered and showed a live feed of the empty fountain area 90 feet away. Then the camera swung back to Atticus standing on the shallow edge, water lapping at his ankles. He held a mic, shoulders squared. My heart thundered so loud I couldn't hear anything else. He took a breath and began. I'm doing this because I need to say it once where the whole city can hear. He spoke each word with measured calm. I can't love someone who doesn't trust me. I can't be with someone who reads my mind instead of listening. He glanced around at the faceless crowd, then locked eyes with the camera. I'm breaking up with you, he said. The plaza fell into stunned silence. A woman behind me gasped. A man coughed. I pressed my palm to my mouth, feeling nausea rise. I remembered the evenings he spent talking about building a life together, moving in, maybe a dog. None of that mattered now. The plaza screen shifted to show his face close up. Tears glistened in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, voice thick. I can't do this anymore. And he turned and walked out of frame. The live feed cut to black. A moment later, the clock reappeared with a new message. Thank you for coming. I stared at that screen, choking back tears I didn't want public. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the fountain's edge, drenched by stray splashes. I looked at Atticus' retreating figure blending into the crowd, realizing this was the last time I'd see him in person. People started moving, whispering, some clapping politely as if they'd just watched the end of a theater show. My friend Mia knelt beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. That was brutal, she whispered. I nodded, too stunned to speak. Someone offered me a bottle of water from a vendor stand, but I shook my head and let it fall. I stared at the plaza screen, now playing a loop of the countdown, ticking up from 0. It struck me how you controlled every moment of it, from the timer to the live stream to the final words. I felt exposed, like an exhibit on display. The ground around me buzzed with chatter. He really did it. That takes guts. Did you see how calm she looked? I wanted to shout that I was anything but calm. After a while, I stood up and brushed my jeans off. I ignored the curious glances, the selfies being taken with the screen in the background. I eased through the dispersing crowd, pulled my phone from my pocket and deleted his message, then blocked his number. My fingers shook, but I knew I had to do it. The walk home felt hollow. Every familiar storefront and corner held echoes of our dates. The bookstore where we browsed for hours, the taco stand where he'd introduced me to Al Pastor. I passed them all without stopping, head down, shoulders hunched. I thought about how he rented that huge screen and mic just to make sure I heard him. The effort was staggering, the humiliation total. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I locked the door behind me and sank onto the floor, leaning against it. I let the tears come soft and steady. I texted Mia. Thanks for being there. She replied, anytime. I didn't write more because I couldn't. The words Atticus had chosen replayed in my mind. I'm breaking up with you. Plain, direct, impossible to ignore. I spent the evening curled up on the couch, scrolling through news stories and social posts about that epic breakup. I saw screen grabs of the clock, bits of his speech, comments praising his bravery. I felt like a character in someone else's story. I didn't care about bravery or viral fame. I just felt broken. When sleep finally came, it was fitful, filled with dreams of screens and timers and a voice booing my rejection. I woke up before dawn, heart pounding, and sat on the edge of my bed. I realized the plaza would be empty now, the screen dark, the clock reset for someone else's event. Atticus' message would vanish into memory, and life would move on. I got up, made tea, and looked out the window as the streetlights flickered off. I felt hollow, but also oddly free. He'd chosen to end things in the biggest, loudest way possible. All I could do was live quietly after that, step by step, without timers or cameras. And maybe, eventually, the silence would feel like a welcome change instead of a void. I was bleary-eyed and clutching my favorite travel mug when I dragged myself into the office kitchenette for my morning coffee run. It was 8:23, the exact minute I texted him, "See you soon," every weekday for the last 6 months. Today, the barista greeted me with that half smile, half awkward lip I hadn't noticed before. She slid a fresh cup toward me, and I cradled it like it was a lifeline. Then I saw it, the sleeve wrapped around my cup. "You deserve better." It read in neat black font on off-white cardboard. I blinked, convinced I was still half asleep. My hands trembled as I lifted the cup, reading the rest. I can't keep doing this, and maybe it's time to let go. I spun around, nearly knocking over the sugar dispenser. There he was at the counter, chatting with our coworker like it was just another Tuesday. I clutched the cup tighter, heart pounding. I managed to clear my throat. "Where did you get these?" I asked, voice a little sharp. The barista shrugged, tilting her head toward the back room. "They came in this morning," she said. "New sleeves." I slid past her, determination flaring. In the supply closet, I found a whole box of them, stacks and stacks with breakup messages printed all around. Each one different. "I'm tired of your excuses. You act like I'm optional. This isn't working anymore." My stomach lurched as I realized these weren't generic motivational quotes. They were so specific, so personal, I could practically hear his voice in every line. I backed out of the closet, trying to steady my breath. My cup was sweating in my hand. The coffee sloshed inside, black and bitter. I hurried back to the counter, but he was gone. My mind raced. He'd set this up. He'd commandeered the coffee sleeves at our favorite spot, turning my daily pick-me-up into a public display of our breakup. The calorie-laden breakfast pastries felt like a trap, sitting under glass domes labeled fresh and trust, mocking me in silent pastry solidarity. I retreated to my desk, cup in hand, and sank into my chair. My coworkers passed by, eyes flicking to the sleeve, me, and back again. One whispered "yikes," another half laughed behind her hand. I felt like a spectacle. I looked down at the cup again. I don't want to pick up the pieces. The words felt like sandpaper against my skin, scratching at my confidence. I took a sip, burned my tongue on hot coffee, and set the cup down. I wondered if he'd known I'd be here at exactly 8:23. Maybe he'd timed this so perfectly I have no escape. I could almost picture him, grinning behind his laptop, tracking inventory orders for the sleeves he'd had printed overnight. His plan had been flawless. Plant the sleeves, watch me discover them, and let the whole office know our relationship was over. I stared at the cursor blinking on my screen, blinking back at me. Work was suddenly a maze of shame. Every email I opened felt like a reminder that I'd just been dumped by coffee. No, we need to talk. No late-night text. It was "I'm done," printed for the world to see. I imagined the sleeves circulating beyond this break room, down the hall into the lobby, maybe even in the conference room at the client meeting later. The thought made my skin crawl. I tried to focus on my to-do list, but each line blurred. I tried to call my friend, but my hands shook too badly to dial. I tapped a text to him. "You're the lowest." "Congrats." I stared at the unsent message, felt a flash of relief that I hadn't actually sent it. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of direct response. Instead, I gathered my stuff and marched back to the kitchenette. The barista was rolling out a cart stacked with replacement sleeves, humming softly. I blocked her path, grabbed the box, and dumped every sleeve into the trash. They fluttered out like wounded butterflies. "You broke my trust. I deserve honesty. Goodbye." I shoved my travel mug under the cart and twisted off the sleeve holder, prying out any leftover pieces. The clack of cardboard scraping metal was oddly satisfying. She watched me, eyebrows raised. "Rough morning?" she asked softly. I nodded, trying to keep my voice calm. "Just personal stuff." She offered a sympathetic smile. I forced one back and backed away, leaving the kitchenette disarmed. The coffee machine hissed behind me, still brewing more sleeves for the next victim. Back at my desk, I set my mug down on a coaster and swallowed. The office hummed around me, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, voices low and focused. The adrenaline faded, giving way to exhaustion. I'd been ambushed by cardboard and coffee, humiliated by my own caffeine habit turned weapon. I took the plunge and texted my best friend in all caps, "I GOT do an MPD by coffee." She replied within seconds, "You poor thing. Vinyl later." I typed back yes and closed my laptop. I shut down all the tabs, pushed my chair back, and stood up. My mug felt lighter in my hand without that sleeve of shame. I checked one last time to make sure none had snuck into my copy of project files. Satisfied, I slipped it into my bag and headed for the exit. Outside, the sun hit me like fresh air. I inhaled, feeling my chest loosen. The office building loomed behind me with its reflective glass and neat rows of desks, but I was done with that world for today. I climbed into my car, tossed the mug into the passenger seat, and drove toward my friend's place, the road feeling like a ribbon unspooling in front of me. That night, with my travel mug cleaned and put away, I toasted a glass of wine to myself in her kitchen. We replayed the story, laughed at the absurdity, and she made me promise to switch to tea for a while. I realized I deserved more than a public cardboard breakup. I deserved honesty face to face, even if it hurt more in the moment. In the morning, I ordered a brand new set of plain white sleeves for my own travel mug. No messages, no surprises. Just a fresh start and a silent promise that next time I'd handle the breakup myself without letting coffee do the talking. I walked into the Skylark just after sunset, the rooftop bar glowing with fairy lights and the skyline sloping off into pink and gold. Dorian had texted me days ago, "Come by Friday night, I have a surprise." I figured it was some indie band he'd discovered, since he loved showcasing hidden gems. I climbed the metal stairwell, heart light, imagining us clinking cocktails and swaying to a tune we both loved. Inside, the bar was packed. The tribute band set up on a small stage at the far end, instruments gleaming under the spotlights. Bartenders slid margaritas across the counter, and friends were already gathered around a high-top table near the speakers. I spotted Dorian leaning against the railing, his grin catching the light. He waved, looking so proud I felt a warm rush in my chest. I grabbed a drink and joined him just as the band struck their first chords. It was our song, the one we danced to on our first date at a friend's wedding. Every note perfect, every lyric a promise we believed in. We slipped onto the dance floor, bodies close, and I closed my eyes, letting the melody carry me back to that night. The way he held my hand, the way the DJ had played it just for us. I glanced at Dorian, and he mouthed, "Better than the recording, right?" I nodded, grinning. The band played through two more songs, crowd humming along, phoned aloft for videos. I sipped my drink, leaned against Dorian, feeling the world shrink to this rooftop under dusk. Then the drummer finished a beat, and the guitarist signaled a change. I raised an eyebrow at Dorian, thinking maybe they'd surprise us with something unexpected. But then the first bars of a breakup anthem blasted through the speakers, loud, insistent, lyrics about heartbreak and betrayal. I froze. The crowd glanced around, confused. The lead singer cleared his throat and the beat dropped hard, a stark contrast to the gentle rhythm we'd been dancing to. Then I heard it, Dorian's voice, clear and recorded, echoing across the rooftop. I can't keep pretending anymore. I need to say this while everyone's listening. I don't love you anymore. My heart lurched. I nearly dropped my drink. The lyrics match, "You tore me up, left me flat, I'm done with us, I'm taking back." The singer's voice cut through with each chorus, and the band moved with purpose, drums hammering the words home. I pushed past people, my stomach twisting, and tried to find Dorian, but the flashing lights and sweaty faces made it impossible. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I yanked it out, but it was empty. No text, no call. I looked back to the stage. Dorian stood beside the speakers, arms folded, watching me. His expression was calm, like he was observing his own art piece go live. My vision blurred as I realized he'd scripted this entire spectacle, had hired the band, recorded his speech, and chosen lyrics that mirrored everything we fought about. "You never listen. You always cancel. You left me here alone." I dropped my drink, glass shattering on the wooden floor. The band didn't miss a beat. The lead singer kicked into the bridge. The crowd backed up, sensing the drama. Friends standing nearby whispered, caught in the storm. I held my breath, mouth dry, trying to process how Dorian could weaponize a rooftop bar into my public shame. The song ended with a final emphasized line. "Goodbye, I'm gone." The guitarist struck a single chord and let it ring out. Then the lights dimmed abruptly, plunging the bar into darkness for a split second before the fairy lights glowed again. The tribute band packed up, gathering cables, and headed down the stairs without a word. Dorian stepped forward, spotlight hitting his face for the first time. He took a slow bow, as if soliciting applause, but the crowd stood frozen. I blinked back tears, then forced myself to push through the throng, heading for the stairwell. I felt pushed from behind, hands trying to steady me, murmurs asking if I was okay. But I didn't stop. I ran down the stairs, each metal tread echoing my pulse until I burst out into the cool night air. I didn't look back. I just kept running until the bar lights were a distant glow behind me. My legs felt wobbly, my lungs burning, but I didn't care. I flagged a cab without waiting, told the driver to go home fast. In the backseat, I stared out the window at the city lights, letting them blur into streaks of shame. When I got home, I fumbled for my keys, nearly dropping them in the lock. I stumbled inside and locked the door, heart still pounding. The echoes of that rooftop song played in my mind. I don't love you anymore. I sank to the floor in the hallway, sliding down until my back hit the door. I curled up, hugging my knees, and let the tears come. My phone lay on the coffee table, unopened. I turned on the TV for background noise, some late-night talk show laugh track, but I couldn't focus on anything but that betrayal. I thought of all the nights we'd spent planning his surprise parties, of that conversation where he said he saw a future for us. All of it staged, turned into a performance. He turned our relationship into a spectacle for strangers, and that was the punchline. I lay there for hours, half asleep, until the sky lightened outside. When my eyes finally opened, day had broken. I wiped my face, stood, and found my spilled drink still staining the floor. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, steadying myself. I knew I needed to reclaim my story. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through contacts until I found my best friend, and tapped video call. When she picked up, her face filled the screen. I didn't wait for her to ask. I launched into it. Every detail, every note of that rooftop betrayal. She said, "I'm so sorry," over and over, her hand reaching across the screen. I let her words wash over me. I went to the market later and bought fresh flowers, bright sunflowers and daisies. I carried them back to my place, noting how strange it felt to touch something so alive after such cruelty. I arranged them in a vase and set them by the window where sunlight could reach. It felt like a small act of reclaiming color after that dark night. That evening, I wrote a post on my own social feed, not calling him out by name, but sharing a simple message. Sometimes love stories need a quiet ending. I didn't mention the rooftop or the band or the recorded speech. I left it open, trusting my friends to read between the lines. Comments began to trickle in, support, offers of a listening ear, virtual hugs. For the first time since that night, I felt connected instead of isolated. Later, I crawled into bed with a notebook and wrote down my own playlist. Songs that felt true to my heartbreak, not scripted by someone else. I jotted lyrics that resonated, honest lines about moving on, private confessions I could own. I closed the notebook and set it on my bedside table. I slept with the window cracked, letting the night air feel like a slow exhale of relief. When morning came, I woke up to sunbeams dancing on the wall, flowers nodding their heads as if to say hello. I stood, stretched, and took a moment to look around my apartment. No stage lights, no audience, just me and my life. I breathed deep and whispered my own line. I deserve honesty, and this time it felt true. I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the front porch and figured it was just another delivery, Amazon boxes, pizza, that kind of thing. When I swung the door open, I saw a neat stack of small black and white boxes sitting on my welcome mat. Each one was sealed with a gold sticker and had a handwritten label. For you. No note, no name. I narrowed my eyes and carried them inside, setting them on the kitchen table where morning light hit them just right, making the stickers glint. I peeled off the top box lid and found a tiny glass candle inside, nestled in black shredded paper. Attached was a little tag with the word regret in cursive. I thought maybe it was a self-care gift. Candles are always marketed as healing, right? I lifted another box, bitterness. Then jealousy, anger, doubt. 6 candles in all, each with a different emotion stamped on the tag. Under each name was a line in smaller print. Regret, sent to old pages and faded dreams. Bitterness, notes of burnt sugar and stale coffee. Jealousy, a whiff of green apple and envy. Anger, cinnamon bark and scorched wood. Doubt, hints of moss and shadow. I pinched the first tag, old pages, faded dreams. It read like the back of a perfume bottle description, but in my head I heard her voice. Freya had never sent me gifts like this before. Her idea of a surprise had been late-night texts or dragging me to art shows. I thought back to last night's argument, her face red, mine defensive, shouting about how she always had to dramatize everything. I jerked open the pantry, pulled out a lighter, and grabbed the regret candle. I set it on the counter, flicked the flame to the wick, and watched the wax melt. The smell was unmistakably dusty, like a library you rarely visit. I closed my eyes and felt a lump in my throat. It captured that moment when I said something cruel, calling her dramatic in front of her friends, and instantly regretted it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Freya. Hope today smells better. No emoji. I swiped open my recent messages and stared at my reply box. Could have been worse. I deleted the draft and tossed my phone aside. Instead, I lifted the next candle marked bitterness and lit it. The air filled with a sharp sweetness that reminded me of her burnt birthday cake attempt, when she tried to surprise me and end up overcooking candles instead of cake. I tossed those memories in with the flame, thinking about how she'd laughed it off, and I questioned why she'd ever try to do anything just for me. By mid-morning, the kitchen looked like an altar of feelings. I lighted up the candles on the windowsill and gave each one its moment in the sun. Passers-by on the sidewalk peeked in, curious about the flickering lights and the faint aroma drifting on an open window. I felt exposed, like my emotions were on display. But maybe that was her point. I decided to take a break and headed outside to water the plants. The neighbor across the street, Mr. Thompson, tipped his hat and asked if I was okay. I shrugged, said I was trying out a new way to start the day. He nodded, watering his rose bushes. He asked about the little boxes, and I told him they were gifts. He gave me a sympathetic look and muttered, "Breakups get creative these days." I blinked at him like I heard that before. He had no idea. I carried the watering can back inside and noticed the candle labeled jealousy was burning low. I lifted it up and took a deep inhale. It was tart, but also a bit sweet, like the green apples she used to bake into pies in the fall. The memory hit me ogling the barista at the coffee shop who flirted with Freya looking hurt but pretending she was fine. Her pride burned louder than that candle. I wiped sweat from my forehead, set the jar down, and noticed my phone buzzing again. This time a gift from her. A cartoon nose turning up at a rose. I stared at it, realized she was calling my watering can and flowers pretentious. Her tagline, "Every bloom hides a thorn." My heart sank. I texted her back as I lit the wrong flame. She replied instantly, "Keep going." I wasn't sure I was ready for anger, but I lit that one next. The scent was spicy, cinnamon heat with a charred undertone. It reminded me of the time I left her waiting in the freezing rain, furious that I didn't have better directions to her birthday dinner. She stood at the curb, coat soaked, while I fumbled with GPS. I'd been annoyed, told her next time to plan better. That memory hit me again, hotter this time. I closed my eyes and felt genuine shame. My chest tightened as I considered whether I wanted to ignite doubt. I hesitated. Doubt was the one I felt every day after she left. I picked it up, read the tag, moss and shadow. Perfect description. I lit, watched wisps of smoke curl, felt my hands tremble. The scent was earthy, grounding yet unsettling. It brought back late-night conversations where she confessed she didn't know if I really loved her or just loved a fantasy of us. I brushed it off, said of course I loved her, but maybe I never proved it. By noon, the apartment felt like a confession booth. I sank onto the couch between the flickering candles, wrote down my thoughts in a notebook. I'm sorry for dinner, for the coffee shop, for the words I can't take back. I scribbled until my pen ran dry, closing the chapter on each regret and anger. Page after page spilled ink as I owned my side in our fights. Later, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Freya standing there, wind-blown hair, cheeks pink from the cold. She slipped inside without a word, eyes flicking to the candles. She looked at me, head tilted. Then she pointed at the notebook. I handed it to her. She read last night's apology scrawls. She nodded slowly, tracing ink with her finger. I watched her face soften, tears gathering. Then she looked at the candles, flickering like wounded fireflies. She picked up regret and inhaled. "Exactly," she said in a low voice. She put it down, moved to anger, and then doubt. Each one she smelled, reliving the memory, then set back in place. I stood there, heart pounding. Finally, she scooped up the box of bitterness and carried it to the trash. She dumped the ashes in melted wax, then did the same with jealousy. I realized she was cleaning out our past, discarding what we couldn't salvage. She lit one candle, regret, and handed it to me. "This one stays," she said, "because we both felt it, but I'll replace the rest." She took another box from my table and began pulling out new tags: trust, patience, forgiveness, hope, love. I watched her write in her neat cursive. We moved through the morning again, swapping old emotions for fresh intentions. She handed me trust, scent of oak and rain, and we lit it together. The smell was light, promising. I inhaled deeply, closing my eyes, and felt my chest unclench. She leaned against me, soft, and whispered, "This is the real gift." As we sat surrounded by flames both new and old, I realized her dramatic candle stunt wasn't about humiliation. It was a call to action, a map of our shared mistakes and the way forward. The scents would linger, old arguments, yes, but also the promise of something better. I reached for her hand, and we watched the wicks burn, one by one lighting our second chance. I was halfway to my evening class when the bus pulled up beside me at the stop, and I glanced up just in time to see the electronic billboard scrolling a message. "I'm leaving because you never make time for us." I blinked, thinking it was some guerrilla art project, until I noticed the quoted text at the bottom. Or. My heart jolted. That's me. Orion Bohr. Well, the shorthand he always used when he texted. I watched the bus pull away, the next frame loading. "You shut me out when I needed you most." A pang hit my chest. I fumbled for my phone, thumb hovering over his number, mind spinning. By the time I reached campus, my head felt like a pinball machine of shock and confusion. Everyone on the sidewalk seemed to be staring at passing buses, phones out, snapping pictures. I ducked into the student union lounge, my backpack slapping against my leg. My best friend, Carla, looked up from her laptop. "What's wrong?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just watch." I pointed out the window where a second bus rolled by with a new message. "I can't compete with a screen." Carla's eyes went wide. "No way." She grabbed her bag and followed me outside. We spent the next 20 minutes hopping between bus stops, catching messages that scrolled every few seconds. "You forgot my birthday." "You ghosted me on the worst day." "I'm tired of making excuses for you." Each one felt like a fresh cut. My mind raced back to the nights I'd buried myself in my phone for work or study and forgotten to reply to him. The bus drivers must have shared the same route because every vehicle had his texts in bright LED letters, flashing in sequence like chapters of a breakup novel. My phone finally buzzed with a text from him. "Hope you're paying attention." That was it. No apology, no explanation beyond what was burning across moving buses. Carla put a hand on my arm. "You want to do something?" I shook my head, grabbing her arm. "I just want to understand why." We watched until the last bus passed, then retreated to a coffee shop across the street. Over steaming lats, I stared at the cup sleeve, half expecting more messages. Carla scrolled through social media. Every local feed was lighting up with screenshots of his words. Some friends wrote sorry, others joked never seen a breakup so public. I sipped carefully, trying to swallow the humiliation. "Why the buses?" I asked. "Why not call me?" Carla shrugged, eyes sympathetic. "Dude loves drama." I frowned. "But this, it's mean." I tapped at my phone, drafted a text, but deleted it. His messages had already reached hundreds, maybe thousands, of strangers. I felt their eyes on me whenever a bus rumbled by. I kept replaying the words in my head. "I'm tired of making excuses for you." What excuses had I made? I thought of my late nights in the lab, my detours to help classmates, the promises I'd broken. I realized I'd taken him for granted, again. I paid my tab, shaking out of the coffee shop haze, and told Carla I needed to see him face to face. She nodded and walked with me down the sidewalk, dodging buses. I leveled my gaze at each approaching vehicle, not sure if I still felt anger or just deep, raw embarrassment. When I reached his apartment door, I paused. I rapped on the wood, heart thundering like a bass drum. After a moment, he opened it, looking tired and distant. He didn't smile. "You saw it," he said. I nodded, swallowing hard. I did. He stepped aside and let me in. The living room was dim, scattered with textbooks and a half-empty bottle of beer. He pointed to a laptop perched on the coffee table, screen open to the bus company's ad portal. I walked over, peered at the control panel where he'd scheduled each message on a rotation. Dates, times, routes, all meticulously planned. I wanted you to see what I feel every day, he said quietly, voice edged with hurt. Invisible. My chest clenched. I realized how often I had brushed past him, eyes glued to my screen. I remembered the time he waited in the rain for me to finish my group project, how I barely noticed when I finally emerged. I saw the blue glow of my phone in his eyes those nights, the longing that became resentment. He closed the lid of the laptop and faced me. I tried asking you to talk. You canceled for the third time last weekend. You promised we'd spend time, then dropped me for another commitment. His voice wavered. So I went public. I took a breath. I'm sorry. I screwed up. Tears pricked behind my eyes. But I didn't want to humiliate you. His jaw clenched. It's already done. I crossed to him, found his hand. Let me make it right, I said, voice rough. He pulled away slightly. How? I thought fast. I'll pay for every ad slot, every bus. I'll apologize on the same screens. His eyes flicked with surprise. You would do that? I nodded hard. I'll show up where you need me without screens. He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. We sat on the couch and outlined a plan. I'd reverse the messages, schedule apologies and affirmations, routes we both used, times he commuted, all of it. Each message would scroll alongside fresh statements. I'm sorry for ignoring you. You're my priority. I'll make time. It felt awkward to draft public apologies, but I knew it was the only way to counteract the damage. That night we were side by side, typing messages into the ad portal. We laughed when one came out cheesy, scratched it, and rewrote. We paused for late-night pizza, ate cold slices on the floor, and talked about the root of our issues. Trust, communication, expectations. It was raw and vulnerable, the opposite of flashing bus signs. The next morning, I rode the bus to work and watched the screens light up with new text. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. The bus rolled by again. You're my priority. A few seats ahead, two strangers pointed and read the words. I caught their eyes and gave a small, awkward wave. They smiled back, curious but kind. By the end of the day, the rotation included 5 messages we crafted together. Each appearance felt like a small step toward rebuilding. I texted him a photo from my commute, messages glowing inside the bus, and he replied with a thumbs up and a heart emoji. Over the next week, we watched as the screens changed. We rode buses together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about the road schedules. The public display still felt strange, but it grounded us in a shared project, one that required honesty and effort. People on the street started nodding as we passed, like they knew our story and respected the effort to own up. One evening, we sat at the bus stop where it all began. A bus arrived, scrolled our final message. Thank you for your patience. We stood together, shoulders touching, and watched. When the words faded, he looked at me and smiled. A real one this time. Maybe next time I'll just text you, he said. I chuckled and wrapped an arm around him. Next time I'll pick up. The bus pulled away, leaving us alone under the evening sky, ready to write the next chapter off screen. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed with an alert from the delivery app. Order picked up. I frowned. No coffee or snack on my schedule, and opened the map. A cyclist icon was already 5 minutes away, destination, my apartment. I figured it was a wrong order until the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a delivery bag on my mat and a lone cyclist waving before heading off. Inside was a neatly sealed envelope, stamped with my name and an address I recognized, the Thai place where Zara and I used to order pad Thai on Friday nights. I opened it on my porch. I'm sorry, but this is goodbye. Heat rose in my cheeks. I'd left that restaurant weeks ago, but here was a letter waiting for me at home. I carried it inside and slid it open. Her handwriting was careful, looping, as if she'd practiced this goodbye on scrap paper first. I read her apology about feeling taken for granted, her fear we'd grown apart, and her final line, I wish you well. It stung when I thought that was the end, until my phone buzzed again. Another delivery notification. Order picked up. The map showed a different rider going to the corner bodega where we grabbed sandwiches after late study sessions. I bolted out the door just in time to see him pedal away. On the counter inside was another envelope addressed to me. I tore it open, hands shaking. You never noticed how hard I tried. I sank onto a bar stool, reading her reminder about the nights she stayed up revising my presentations, the time she comforted me when I failed, and her disappointment that I gushed over my friends' achievements but barely mentioned hers. I felt like someone had reached into my memory and highlighted every time I overlooked her. I shoved the letter into my pocket, bought a Gatorade I hadn't ordered, and marched home. By the time I unlocked my door, the bag with the bodega letter sat next to my front mat. I grabbed it, tore it open, and blinked at the next address, the pizza joint where we once rescued each other from heartbreak with extra cheese and midnight pepperoni runs. The envelope inside held her note about my joke at her expense in front of her friends. The one she said made her feel small, and her confession that it broke her trust. I squeezed the paper until the edges curled. All afternoon, the app kept pinging. Cyclists sped to the noodle shop, the grocery store we hit for movie night snacks, the taco truck where she'd insisted I try vegetarian tacos. Each drop-off came with a fresh letter, her voice detailing my blind spots, missing her birthday order, ignoring her when she felt sick, belittling her art projects. Each time I felt a fresh wave of guilt. My lunch break turned into a delivery chase, corner to corner of the city, past places we shared laughter and comfort. By evening, I collected 7 letters, and my shirt had salt stains where I wiped my tears. The last notification sent me to the sushi bar we visited on our first anniversary. The rider waited beside the door, and I approached slowly, dreading the final blow. Inside was her longest note, thicker paper. I love you deeply, but love isn't enough when you're always absent. I leave every message here so you can see the places we built memories, now tinged with my absence. This is where I stop waiting for you. My vision blurred as I folded that letter and walked out into the cooling night. The sushi bar's neon sign flickered, and I remembered our clumsy first toast, the way she laughed when I spilled soy sauce. Now every memory felt like part of an exhibit of my failures. I trudged home, retracing the route through the reminders. By the time I reached my apartment, dusk had settled. The final bag lay by my door. I didn't want to open it. I stared at the stack of envelopes in my hand, 7 snapshots of my negligence. I dropped it on the table and sank onto the couch. My phone buzzed again, a message from Zara. No letter this time, just a text. I hope these places help you understand. Goodbye. I stared at it, swallowed hard, and texted back a single word, sorry. My thumb hovered over delete, but I sent it anyway. I spent the rest of the night pacing, trying to piece together where I had gone wrong and whether I could ever fix it. But each letter had stamped a farewell in a place we'd loved. The delivery riders had been unwitting messengers of my shortcomings, cycling through memories I'd ignored. The next morning I woke up determined. I pulled on my shoes, grabbed my own pad of paper, and set out to visit those 7 spots again. At each one, I left my own envelope, a confession and an apology. At the noodle shop, I wrote about cherishing her laughter. At the bodega, I thanked her for her unwavering support. At the pizza place, I owed the joke that hurt her. I kept going until I stood outside the sushi bar, letter in hand, heart pounding. I wasn't sure she'd come back, but I wanted her to read my words in the places we made them real. I slipped the envelope under the door and walked away, leaving the neon sign flicker behind me. The city felt electric with possibility, not just heartbreak. Maybe this time my words would catch up to my regrets. Maybe this time I'd turn each delivery into a message she couldn't ignore. I tucked my hands into my pockets and headed home, hoping the next ping on my phone would bring her voice saying, I received your letter. Even if it didn't, I knew I'd finally taken her seriously. 4 wheels and a stack of envelopes later. That felt like a start. I was lacing up my running shoes when I noticed a crowd at Cedar Park looked off. Way more people than usual for a Tuesday morning. Runners paused mid-stride. Parents with strollers hovered near the playground fence, and a circle of folding chairs sat empty around a single, freshly carved wooden bench. Curious, I jogged over, sweat still glistening on my forehead, and scanned the gathering faces. That's when I saw Holden leaning against a tree, clipboard in hand, and that half smile he uses when he's proud of something he's done. My heart sank because his surprises usually involve elaborate setups, and not the kind I wanted waking me up at dawn. I slowed to a walk and edged into the semicircle of chairs. The bench at the center was smooth, its grain shining in the sunrise light. Carved into the backrest was the transcript of our last fight. Every angry word, every tearful apology, and all the moments I told him I felt unheard. Yom Kiddit, you never listened, stop talking over me. I'm done repeating myself. It wrapped around the bench like a rhyme, each line etched in meticulous looping script. My mouth went dry. I'd never thought Holden would turn our private pain into public art. Before I could decide whether to step back or bolt, Holden cleared his throat from under the oak. His friends, about 20 of them, straightened in their seats, phones ready. I swallowed and gave a small wave that might have looked like a nod of greeting but felt like a plea for mercy. Holden stepped forward, arms wide. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice steady. "I asked you here because this bench tells our story." My cheeks flushed as I recognized the opening lines. He motioned to the bench, then to the chairs. "Please sit. Remember what happened here." I hesitated, but the crowd shuffled expectantly. I chose a chair near the front, heart pounding like a drum. A few chairs down, someone whispered wild, another said, "Did he really?" I stared at the carved words, feeling the wood surface under my fingertips. Each letter was smooth, no splinters, like the sculptor had coaxed every memory into the grain. I remembered our argument, that night in the living room, rain pounding the windows, me shouting about his workaholic ways, and shouting back that I didn't appreciate his hustle. The fight had ended with slammed doors and silence so thick we barely spoke for days. Holden cleared his throat again. "I know it's heavy. I wanted you to feel how it felt to sit with this." He gestured to the bench. "But there's more." He pulled a small stack of note cards from his pocket and handed one to everyone. I unfolded mine with shaking fingers. It read, "What do you see here? What do you feel?" Underneath was a blank line. My thoughts tangled, I scribbled shame in shaky letters. He called out a few volunteers to read their words. Someone said regret, another closure, someone else embarrassment. When it was my turn, I held up my card and spoke. "Shame." My voice cracked. The crowd nodded sympathetically. Holden waited until the murmurs faded. "Thank you," he said, voice gentle. "Shame is part of it. I felt it too." I swallowed and looked at him. His gaze met mine, steady, vulnerable. He shifted forward. "I commissioned this bench because our fights became monuments in our minds. We replayed them on repeat. I wanted to carve them into something real so we cooled." He paused, blinked rapidly. "So I could let them go." My chest tightened. Carving our last argument into wood felt permanent. But Holden was right. Every time I tried to move on, the words echoed in my head. He stepped aside, gave a nod to a woman by the tree. She was a sculptor wiping sawdust from her apron. She held a second plank of wood, blank and waiting. Holden beckoned her forward. She set the plank on the bench's armrest and unveiled a carving tool. "This is for you," Holden said, addressing me. "Come up and carve your line." My heart stuttered. Me. In front of all these people, the whispers picked up. "No way. Oh God, watch this." I took a breath and stood, legs trembling. Holden handed me the tool and I approached the blank plank. My mind raced through every possible line I could carve. "I'm sorry I scared you. I love you more than my work. Can we start over?" I traced my finger over the wood, feeling its cool surface. The sculptor smiled, waiting. I knelt, placed the tool's tip against the grain, and drew out 3 words. "I'm sorry, truly." My hand shook, sawdust filtering down into the grass. The bench circle fell silent as I carved. I felt something lift from my chest. When I finished, I stood and looked back. The plank bore my apology in jagged script, imperfect, but sincere. Holden stepped forward, took my hand, and squeezed it. "Thank you," he said, voice thick. I nodded, blinking back tears. He turned to everyone. "These sculptures are more than art. They're a map of how we hurt each other and how we heal." He patted the bench under our apology, then the new plank. "I'll place both pieces together at home. This bench stays here in the park. Anyone can come, sit, read, and know that words have weight." He couldn't stop the breeze from rustling through the oak leaves, but his words settled in the morning light. His friends dispersed slowly, offering hugs and quiet support. I let Holden lead me away from the bench, feeling the ground solid under my feet again. We walked to the pond nearby where ducks paddled through ripples. He slipped his arm around me, silent. I leaned into him, heart still racing but steadier than before. We found a flat rock by the water and sat, holding hands. I looked at him, trying to decide what to say. He offered me a sandwich from the cooler he'd packed. I took a bite, tasting mustard and yesterday's bakery bread. It was comfort food, ordinary grounding. I chewed, searching for words beyond apology. He waited, lifting his coffee thermos for a sip. Finally, I said, I never thought I'd be the one carving my sorry into wood. He laughed softly, the sound warm. Neither did I, he admitted. But I needed to see it outside my head. I needed to see it in yours. I nodded, understanding that sometimes permanence is the path to letting go. The sun climbed higher, warming the park. We sat in companionable silence, watching ducks chase ripples. The bench with our argument stood behind us, witness to our journey. The new plank held my apology, a reminder that healing takes more than words in the dark. It needs sunlight and community. When we finally stood to leave, Holden linked our fingers and carried the plank home. We passed the bench one more time. I reached out and ran my fingertip over the carved letters of our fight and my apology. The wood felt alive, like a vow hardened into grain. Down the path, we walked without hurrying. Tomorrow, someone might sit on that bench and read our argument, feel the weight of harsh words in fresh air. Tomorrow, someone else might add their own apology on that blank plank. And every time someone did, I knew our scars would fade a bit more, one carved line at a time. I was lacing up my running shoes when I noticed a crowd at Cedar Park looked off. Way more people than usual for a Tuesday morning. Runners paused mid-stride. Parents with strollers hovered near the playground fence, and a circle of folding chairs sat empty around a single freshly carved wooden bench. Curious, I jogged over, sweat still glistening on my forehead, and scanned the gathering faces. That's when I saw Holden leaning against a tree, clipboard in hand, and that half smile he uses when he's proud of something he's done. My heart sank because his surprises usually involve elaborate setups, and not the kind of wanted waking me up at dawn. I slowed to a walk and edged into the semicircle of chairs. The bench at the center was smooth, its grain shining in the sunrise light. Carved into the backrest was the transcript of our last fight. Every angry word, every tearful apology, and all the moments I've told him I felt unheard. You don't get it. You never listen. Stop talking over me. I'm done repeating myself. It wrapped around the bench like a rhyme, each line etched in meticulous, looping script. My mouth went dry. I'd never thought Holden would turn our private pain into public art. Before I could decide whether to step back or bolt, Holden cleared his throat from under the oak. His friends, about 20 of them, straightened in their seats, phones ready. I swallowed and gave a small wave that might have looked like a nod of greeting but felt like a plea for mercy. Holden stepped forward, arms wide. Thanks for coming, he said, voice steady. I asked you here because this bench tells our story. My cheeks flushed as I recognized the opening lines. He motioned to the bench, then to the chairs. Please sit. Remember what happened here. I hesitated, but the crowd shuffled expectantly. I chose a chair near the front, heart pounding like a drum. A few chairs down, someone whispered wild, another said, Did he really? I stared at the carved words, feeling the wood surface under my fingertips. Each letter was smooth, no splinters, like the sculptor had coaxed every memory into the grain. I remembered our argument that night in the living room, rain pounding the windows, me shouting about his workaholic ways, and shouting back that I didn't appreciate his hustle. The fight had ended with slammed doors and silence so thick we barely spoke for days. Holden cleared his throat again. I know it's heavy. I wanted you to feel how it felt to sit with this. He gestured to the bench. But there's more. He pulled a small stack of note cards from his pocket and handed one to everyone. I unfolded mine with shaking fingers. It read, What do you see here? What do you feel? Underneath was a blank line. My thoughts tangled. I scribbled shame in shaky letters. He called out a few volunteers to read their words. Someone said regret, another closure, someone else embarrassment. When it was my turn, I held up my card and spoke. Shame. My voice cracked. The crowd nodded sympathetically. Holden waited until the murmurs faded. "Thank you," he said, voice gentle. "Shame is part of it. I felt it too." I swallowed and looked at him. His gaze met mine, steady, vulnerable. He shifted forward. "I commissioned this bench because our fights became monuments in our minds. We replayed them on repeat. I wanted to carve them into something real so we'd hold." He paused, blinked rapidly. "So I could let them go." My chest tightened. Carving our last argument into wood felt permanent. But Holden was right. Every time I tried to move on, the words echoed in my head. He stepped aside, gave a nod to a woman by the tree. She was the sculptor wiping sawdust from her apron. She held a second plank of wood, plank, and waiting. Holden beckoned her forward. She set the plank on the bench's armrest and unveiled a carving tool. "This is for you," Holden said, addressing me. "Come up and carve your line." My heart stuttered. Me. In front of all these people. The whispers picked up. "No way. Oh God. Watch this." I took a breath and stood, legs trembling. Holden handed me the tool and I approached the blank plank. A mind raced through every possible line I could carve. "I'm sorry I scared you. I love you more than my work." And we start over. I traced my finger over the wood, feeling its cool surface. The sculptor smiled, waiting. I knelt, placed the tool's tip against the grain, and drew out 3 words. "I'm sorry, truly." My hand shook, sawdust filtering down into the grass. The bench circle fell silent as I carved. I felt something lift from my chest. When I finished, I stood and looked back. The plank bore my apology in jagged script, imperfect but sincere. Holden stepped forward, took my hand, and squeezed it. "Thank you," he said, voice thick. I nodded, blinking back tears. He turned to everyone. "These sculptures are more than art. They're a map of how we hurt each other and how we heal." He patted the bench under our apology, then the new plank. "I'll place both pieces together at home. This bench stays here in the park. Anyone can come, sit, read, and know that words have weight." He couldn't stop the breeze from rustling through the oak leaves, but his words settled in the morning light. His friends dispersed slowly, offering hugs and quiet support. I let Holden lead me away from the bench, feeling the ground solid under my feet again. We walked to the pond nearby where ducks paddled through ripples. He slipped his arm around me silent. I leaned into him, heart still racing but steadier than before. We found a flat rock by the water and sat, holding hands. I looked at him, trying to decide what to say. He offered me a sandwich from the cooler he packed. I took a bite, tasting mustard and yesterday's bakery bread. It was comfort food, ordinary grounding. I chewed, searching for words beyond apology. He waited, lifting his coffee thermos for a sip. Finally, I said, "I never thought I'd be the one carving my sorry into wood." He laughed softly, the sound warm. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But I needed to see it outside my head. I needed to see it in yours." I nodded, understanding that sometimes permanence is the path to letting go. The sun climbed higher, warming the park. We sat in companionable silence, watching ducks chase ripples. The bench with our argument stood behind us, witness to our journey. The new plank held my apology, a reminder that healing takes more than words in the dark. It needs sunlight and community. When we finally stood to leave, Holden linked our fingers and carried the plank home. We passed the bench one more time. I reached out and ran my fingertip over the carved letters of our fight and my apology. The wood felt alive, like a vow hardened into grain. Down the path, we walked without hurrying. Tomorrow, someone might sit on that bench and read our argument, feel the weight of harsh words in fresh air. Tomorrow, someone else might add their own apology on that blank plank, and every time someone did, I knew our scars would fade a bit more, one carved line at a time. I was killing time in the college quad between classes when my phone buzzed with a notification from an app I barely used. Try our new filter. Normally I'd ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I tapped the link and pointed my camera at the statue in the center of the lawn. Instead of the familiar stone figure, my screen lit up with floating text. "I loved you more than you loved me." I spun around. Students were snapping selfies, oblivious to the text hovering over the statue. Confusion sank in. Then the filter prompted me. Scan someone you love. I hesitated. My ex and I broke up 2 weeks ago. No dramatic fight, just growing apart. I wondered if someone had coded a betrayal into this AR thing as a joke. I scanned the quad benches, then pointed at an empty chair. The text glowed brighter. You never knew how broken I was. A chill ran down my spine. I closed the app, but it popped back open before I could swipe away. The link had spread across social media so fast it felt viral overnight. That evening, I stashed my laptop on the coffee table and texted my roommate. You seen this filter? She sent back a screenshot, her face under floating words reading, Stop pretending you're fine. She was freaked out. I tried it on my own reflection. The words that framed me. You were too selfish to stay. My throat tightened. I tapped my screen to switch to the back camera, pointed it toward my empty kitchen, and saw, You left me in the dark. I realized this wasn't random. Someone had seeded this filter with breakup lines, our breakup lines. I thought about our last conversation. Me apologizing that things felt off, and telling me I was too caught up in my own world. The words on my screen match almost every apology he'd ever RSP'd and every resentment he'd ever voiced. My hands shook. I grabbed my coat and ran outside, determined to find who was behind this. My phone's battery drained as I ducked into the student union, scanning faces with a camera. It tagged random strangers with lines like, I needed you at 2 a.m., and you never heard me crying. I winced. Each phrase cut like a blade, dredging up memories I'd shoved aside. I realized how personal this felt, like someone had pried open my heart and typed its contents into code. I stormed into the art department computer lab where my friend Leo was tinkering with 3D models. He looked up as I burst in, eyes wide. Mira, calm down. What's up? I showed him the filter link on my phone. He ran his hand through his hair. Whoa, that's invasive. He downloaded the code preview. Looks like someone created an AR effect on the social platform. You can make them area specific, so when you point at a person, it pulls a string from a list tied to hashtags or geotags. My stomach dropped. So they targeted us, me and him. He explained you could embed hidden triggers. I thought about where we hung out. The bench by the river, the swing set in the park, the rooftop of the dorm terrace. They could have geolocked it to those spots, he said. My mind swirled. Who would do this? Leo shrugged. Someone with access to our feed, someone who knew our story. I retraced steps to our favorite spot by the river. Campus was quieter there, willow trees dipping branches over the water. I opened the filter, pointed my phone at the old park bench. The screen lit up with a new line. You promised you'd come back. My vision blurred as I remembered waiting there in the rain, calling him until my voice cracked. I sank onto the seat, phone in hand, heart exploding with sorrow. A voice behind me said, Hey, Mira. It was him, standing on the path, hood up, hands shoved in pockets. He'd seen me from the pier. I closed the app and tucked my phone in my pocket. He approached, uncertainty in his eyes. I got your texts. You okay? I shrugged, trying to steady my breathing. Did you know about this filter? He shook his head. Saw people talking about it online. I tried it on myself. My lines were the same. He sat beside me, gaze on the water. We were silent for a beat, watching leaves drift. Then he said, I think someone used our breakup posts, screenshots, comments, stuff I never meant for everyone to see. I nodded. It's too specific to be random. It's like our private pain went public. He admitted he'd had a fight with his roommate that week. They had the same filter prompts by mistake. He thought his roommate was pranking him. But when I saw it on you, I knew it was targeting us. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened my phone. The filter tagline read, Share to reveal the truth. It had already been used by dozens of people, footage splashing across feeds. I realized we were part of someone else's drama now. We pointed the camera at each other. No text appeared. A small victory. I suggested disabling the filter, reporting it, adding privacy tags, getting the code pulled. He agreed. Back at Lito's lab, we unmasked the effect, reported it to the platform moderators, and asked for removal. Leo deleted the local copy. I felt a weight lift as the filter went offline for maintenance, but I knew it could return under a new name, new code. The damage was done. My pain had been on display. A week later, the filter was gone, replaced by a cat ears lens and a dance challenge. The quad was back to selfies with normal backgrounds, but I kept my phone in my pocket when I walked by the statue. I didn't want to risk seeing those words again floating in air. He and I met at the old bench one last time. We didn't bring phones. We talked about everything: consent, vulnerability, what it means to share pain. He admitted he'd never understood how deeply his words haunted me. I confessed I never knew how to make him see my side. We didn't decide to get back together. It wasn't that simple, but we agreed to leave the filter behind us. As we stood to leave, I took one last look at the bench, now dusted in afternoon sunlight. I felt relief that our story belonged back to us, not to some code that spoon-fed our wounds to the world. I slipped my phone into my bag and walked away, step by step, ready to write our next chapter in moments, not in floating text.